Chapter 577 Slim Hope, Turmoil in the Chu Family. Li Qishan paused, his face pale. Many words stuck in his throat, unable to be uttered. He had not expected that there was such a complicated relationship behind this battle. Li Canghai's lips moved, showing no intention of stopping. He knew clearly that his days were numbered, and if he did not tell these principles to his grandson now, he would never have the chance again after he died. A slightly cold voice once again came from the old man's pale lips. Actually, these signs were already visible earlier. After the battle with the Blood God sect in Chu City, the information that the Divine Dynasty has a Saint King has long been made public. All the saints in the world know that the Divine Dynasty is a place of enlightenment, where saints can attain enlightenment. But we have never heard of any saint attaining enlightenment as a Saint King in the Divine Dynasty. Why is that? The Saint King is different from a saint. He has cultivated the Tao domain and gained a lifespan of 100,000 years. His physical body has long since transcended the mortal realm and cannot be easily killed. Even if only a drop of blood remains, he can still be resurrected. He can be considered immortal. 10,000 years, immortal and indestructible. Li Qishan's throat was dry, and he murmured. He knew very little about the Saint King realm, only that it was the pinnacle of existence on the entire continent, but he was unaware of the supernatural powers of this realm. Only now, after hearing his grandfather recount the story, did he truly feel a sense of awe. Li Canghai took in his expression and said quietly, "That's right, it's 100,000 years. If any power has a Saint King, it's enough to protect that power for 100,000 years. That 100,000 years. Enough time for a dilapidated family to grow into a powerful clan, a force that surpasses all others. You should know that even the current Tianyuan Divine Dynasty has not been around for 100,000 years. Do you think the Tianyuan Divine Dynasty would allow such a variable to exist? If you were in that Divine Dynasty, would you allow it?" After pondering for a moment, Li Qi shook his head. If he were from the Divine Dynasty, he would certainly not allow any existence that could threaten him, since people are inherently selfish. Seeing this, Li Canghai chuckled coldly. Even you wouldn't allow it, let alone the Divine Dynasty. Li Qishan's eyes dimmed, and he couldn't help but say, "Is there really no chance at all? Grandpa, you were just one step away." As he spoke, the young man's voice trembled slightly. Li Qishan really didn't want the old man who had been with him throughout his life to die. Li Canghai closed his eyes, remained silent for a long time, and then replied, "If, in the next few years, the Divine Dynasty can continuously produce Saint King level experts in such large numbers as the current Saint level, or if the Divine Dynasty produces an existence above Saint King, then there might be a sliver of hope for this matter. Perhaps only then will they allow us to break through. However, the hopes for either of these are slim. Leaving aside the immense difficulty of breaking through to the Saint King realm, even the peak Saint realm alone has been a barrier for countless saints throughout the world for an unknown period of time. Not to mention those above the Saint King realm. The realms above the Saint are increasingly difficult, far beyond the Purple Mansion Qi refining stage. How could such beings possibly appear in just a few years?" The words were spoken. Li Qishan kept his head down and remained silent, carefully considering the other party's words. After a short while, his fists clenched tightly, his eyes flashed, and he said, "Sir, there's still hope for you. I won't say how many people can meet the first condition, but for the second, I know someone who can do it in just a few years." The old man smiled, thinking the other person was trying to comfort him, and calmed himself down before speaking. "Oh, who do you think could do that?" "A person with double pupils." Li Qishan spoke without hesitation. "Chu City, Chu family. Clan Chief Chu, you should think this through carefully. The relocation of the entire clan is no small matter. If anything goes wrong, you will regret it for the rest of your life." Inside the hall, an elderly man dressed in gray linen robes spoke slowly, his tone calm, his aged fingers turning the pages of a silk scroll in his hand. These silk scrolls are all the lists of names that the Chu family will be relocating to this time, totaling 12,000 people, including branches and collateral branches, and there are 3 whole scrolls. The old man had a deep and powerful aura, sharp eyes like an eagle's, and his white hair was tied up behind him. The thick calluses on his 5 fingers were very noticeable. At first glance, he gave people an invisible sharpness. In front of her stood a young woman with shimmering eyes, a beautiful and delicate face, and a touch of heroic spirit in her brows and eyes, which added a unique beauty to her. Chu Yin stood there, feeling slightly nervous, and quickly said, "Thank you for the reminder, Senior Qi. I have thought it over these past few days, and am ready to move." She never expected that the person from the Divine Dynasty that her subordinates had reported to her a few days ago would actually be the famous protector of the double-pupiled one, Saint Bao Qian. Unfortunately, she was too busy at that time. Not only did she have to deal with household chores, but she also had to organize the things that needed to be done for the move. She was so busy that she was overwhelmed and stayed in the house all day. She didn't have any time to do anything else. Upon hearing that people from the Divine Dynasty had arrived, they hurriedly instructed their people to treat them with the highest level of courtesy. If I had known it was Qi Yun who was coming, I would have made time to entertain him, no matter how busy I was. Qi Yun thought to herself that she was somewhat regretful, fearing that the other party might think that she was a junior who did not know manners, thus ruining their goodwill. Fortunately, I just heard from my subordinates that Senior Qi has had no complaints about staying at the Chu family these days. Upon hearing this, Qi Yun nodded silently and said no more, then used his divine sense to scan the roster in his hand. He was by nature a man of few words, and if it weren't for the fact that the Crown Prince had a relationship with the other party, he wouldn't have offered a single word of advice. If the roster is correct, the move can be completed in a few days. I will stay at your house for a few more days. If there are any changes to the roster during this time, you can contact me. After a few breaths, Qi Yun withdrew his divine sense. His lips trembled, and he said a simple sentence. Then, as if he had thought of something, he added, "By the way, on the day of the relocation, the Divine Dynasty will send 2 more saints to escort you all with me." As soon as she finished speaking, Chu Yan's beautiful eyes lit up. She hadn't expected that the Divine Dynasty would have 2 saints escorting them. She quickly thanked them and said, "This junior understands. Thank you for informing me, Senior." Qi Yun hummed in agreement and prepared to leave, but Chu Yan stopped him, saying softly, "The clan will be holding a housewarming banquet later. Senior, you are welcome to attend so that I can show you the hospitality of a host." Qi Yan paused for a few moments, unable to find a reason to refuse, so he could only nod woodenly and agree. Upon seeing this, Chu Yan smiled and said to the path ahead, "Senior, this way please." If she can build a good relationship with this senior, she will be able to better understand Nangong Chen in the future. Moreover, we'll all be colleagues in the future in the Divine Dynasty, so there's nothing wrong with building good relationships beforehand. Chu Yan, with a smile on her face, was about to set off when, unexpectedly, a member of her clan stumbled towards her. Upon seeing Chu Yan, the man seemed to see his pillar of support and quickly said, "Clan leader, something terrible has happened. We don't know who spread the news, but it's said that the person with double pupils has killed all the people from the hidden families, and it won't be long before they come and take revenge. Those people you managed to calm down have started to rebel again, and what?" Chu Yan had already wiped the smile off her face. Her brows furrowed slightly, and she quickly asked. Only then did the clansman speak, his expression extremely tense. "Just now, the old patriarch actually regained consciousness. Now that he has learned that you're going to lead people to relocate to the Divine Dynasty, he is furious. A number of people in the clan have already threatened to remove you from your position. Chieftain, perhaps you should lay low for a while." Upon hearing this, Chu Yan clenched her fists slightly, lowered her head, making it impossible to see her expression. After a long while, she finally uttered a muffled sound. "Senior Qi, I'm sorry you had to see this. Perhaps you shouldn't go." The tribesman dare not look at her, and could only look at Qi Yun beside him. Qi Yun shook his head and said, "It's all right, you can go now. I happen to be somewhat interested in your sage." After hearing this, Chu Yan forced a smile, her thoughts unknown, and went to the main hall with Qi Yun. "Wait a minute, I had some things to do yesterday. I'll add 2 chapters today, plus the rating increased by 0.1. That's 3 chapters in total. I'll finish them later." Chapter 578 News Spreads. On Li Jiafeng's back, the old man could still hear the unwavering voice of his grandson. Li Songhai was speechless for a moment. As a saint, he knew better than anyone how difficult it was to cultivate to the next level. Although the person with double pupils was a genius, it was absolutely impossible for him to break through to the realm above the Saint King in just a few years. Throughout history, even in the upper realms, it probably takes only a few years for someone to cross 2 realms from the level of a saint. You must understand that for them, a breakthrough to a minor realm takes thousands of years, and for the Saint King, it would probably take tens of thousands of years. And that's assuming they have decent aptitude. If it were a prodigy with exceptional talent, it would take at least several thousand years, if not 10,000. After a long silence, facing the young man's burning gaze of admiration, Li Songhai uttered 3 words. "Impossible." Li Qishan's face stiffened, and he quickly said, "Why is it impossible? He's in the immortal treasury, where he can break through even during battle. Compared to us, he's worlds apart. Master, you must believe me. Those with double pupils are destined by fate and cannot be judged by ordinary standards." Seeing his grandson's excited expression, Li Songhai sighed and rubbed his forehead, saying, "You brat, I think you shouldn't be surnamed Li, but rather Nangong. Go cultivate in that divine dynasty. How can you turn your own family against your own?" Li Qixin chuckled, knowing the other party was joking, and said dismissively, "Sir, if you were me, you would know why I would believe him. Unfortunately, I am not you, and I do not understand what you are thinking." Li Songhai shook his head and said softly, "You don't know. I've already vaguely touched the threshold of the Saint King realm before I realized how difficult it is to break through to the next level." He looked up at the sky, his withered fingers trembling as he raised them and pointed to the dome. "There is another heaven there, which traps all the sages of the world, preventing us from ever taking another step forward in our lives. Your grandfather has traveled further than them. I happen to see that above that heaven, there are 99 more heavens, beyond description and beyond comprehension." Li Songhai spoke with trepidation, gradually lowering his eyes and panting under Li Qixin's horrified gaze. Li Qixin took in everything, looked up at the sky, and swallowed hard. He felt that the clear blue sky was not as calm as he had imagined, but gradually became ferocious and terrifying, like a tiger baring its fangs and claws. Although he didn't understand why his grandfather said there were 99 layers in the sky, he had some guesses in his heart that it was probably the shackles above the Saint King level. Perhaps only after one breaks through to the level of a sage will one be able to sense something. Li Qixin thought to himself, beginning to feel somewhat uncertain about what he had said earlier. However, he quickly recalled the invincible power displayed by the double-pupiled individual within the immortal treasury, and his chest unconsciously puffed out as he said, "The Crown Prince is no ordinary man. I believe in him, and I am confident that he can overcome this so-called heaven." Li Songhai was both amused and exasperated, pointing at him and saying, You. Before long, a figure arrived in front of the two. It was a member of the Li family's clan guard. The newcomer hurriedly said, "Ancestor, something terrible has happened. We don't know which force leaked the news in the Xiantian domain, but now the entire 3 continents know that Crown Prince Tianyuan has killed members of a hidden family. Rumors are circulating that we should avoid any contact with the Tianyuan divine dynasty in the near future, or we will surely suffer retaliation." Chapter 579, The Strongest Enemy of the Divine Dynasty. These words struck Li Qixin like a thunderbolt, his expression changing drastically. He hadn't expected such a thing to happen at this crucial moment. Although the old man beside him was somewhat moved, he concealed his emotions very well. He simply nodded slightly, his eyes thoughtful, and remained calm and composed. In the end, the truth will always come out. Li Qixin murmured, his expression complex. The man with double pupils killed the heirs and followers of 2 families. Only a few forces at Changshan Pass and Jinmen Pass knew about this on that day. Very few people were aware of it. At that time, they had all joined a righteous alliance. The leaders of the various forces exchanged ideas and tacitly decided to keep the matter a secret. However, they never expected that someone would leak it after some time. Leaking this matter would bring them no benefit, nor would it benefit the divine dynasty, unless some people are determined to sever all ties with the divine dynasty. Li Qixin was immediately at a loss, unsure of how to resolve the situation, and could only subconsciously look at the old man beside him. To everyone's surprise, the old man's reaction was indifferent. He simply asked, "Have you investigated who released this information? Which family?" The clan guard silently observed the expressions of the 2 men. Upon seeing the drastic change in the overlord's expression, he thought to himself, "It seems this might not be a rumor. It's highly likely that it's true." The old man's calm words reached his ears, and he quickly bowed slightly, pulling himself back to reality, and said, "Reporting to the ancestor, the clan's experts have investigated, but found no trace of the aristocratic family. They only captured a few weak cultivators, and, after some interrogation, they finally confessed that they were forced to accept bribes. Apart from that, nothing else was found." This rumor appeared extremely strangely in a very short time. Almost overnight, after finishing his sentence, Li Qixin quickly looked at his grandfather and hurriedly said, "There is probably someone behind this, but I don't know which force in the righteous alliance it is." Li Songhai did not answer, but simply waved his hand to send the clan guard away. A few breaths later, seeing his figure gradually disappear into the distance, he slowly spoke up. "This may not have been leaked by any force within the righteous alliance. There are also spies planted by reclusive families in the 3 states who are in contact with the main family. Perhaps after the successors of those 2 families died, they failed to make contact with these spies, which aroused their suspicion. By following the clues, they discovered the truth behind it all. In short, whether it's the intention of the reclusive family behind them or their personal actions, this matter will most likely bring considerable trouble to the divine dynasty. If not handled properly, it could cause widespread unease." At this point, Li Songhai let out a long sigh. Li Qixin suddenly understood and said, "So that's how it is. I thought it was leaked by their forces, but I didn't expect it was a hidden family behind it." He then clenched his fist and said in a deep voice, "The best way to stop this rumor is to put an end to it. If the Tianyuan divine dynasty can withstand the wrath of the hidden families, then the world can be at peace." Li Songhai did not respond to him, but said softly, "Go to the clan's central courtyard and take charge of the overall situation. The clan is currently in a period of revival, and we must not let things get chaotic. You should also hone your abilities in this area." Li Qishan nodded slightly, then disappeared from the spot, leaving only Li Songhai behind. The old man looked eastward, and seeing that no one was around, he revealed the worry in his eyes and muttered to himself, "Offending one reclusive family would be fine, but now that we've offended both, things are getting complicated. This might be the strongest enemy the Divine Dynasty has ever faced since its founding. We don't know if we can overcome this challenge." Chapter 582, Shanha Awakens, Changes in the Chu Family. Meanwhile, the Chu family. Inside the hall, Chu Shanha woke up at midnight and is now sitting in the head of the family seat, his brows furrowed, listening to the elders below recount the events of the past few days. He wore a silver-white robe, and although his face was middle-aged, it was still very handsome, with a high-nosed bridge and slightly fair skin. It was not hard to see that he had looked like a handsome young nobleman in his youth. However, the distance between his eyebrows was a little short, and his eyes were as deep as ink, giving people a sense of being extremely cunning and treacherous. Now, with that furrowed brow, though silent, he exudes an invisible, authoritative aura, like a wounded eagle licking its wounds and coldly surveying its subordinates. Below, a row of people knelt down, prostrating themselves on the ground, not daring to look directly at the figure. They felt as if a dark cloud was pressing down on them, making it hard to breathe. Their eyes were filled with fear, cold sweat poured down their backs, and they seemed somewhat dazed. These days, they had lived comfortably under Chu Yan's rule and had forgotten about this ruthless ruler of their clan. But now, they were clearly remembering her. The old patriarch was already furious, and now a few old men from the other faction are fanning the flames. I'm afraid that when Yenner arrives, the conflict between the father and daughter will escalate even further. One of the elders who supported Chu Yan secretly thought to himself, and couldn't help but sigh. Since the old patriarch fell into a coma, they have all witnessed Chu Yan's progress in managing the family. Even if some decisions may not be made well, she will quickly correct them, gather wisdom from all sides, and is willing to learn. She can be considered a wise ruler. Despite being a woman, she possesses astonishing talent. From any perspective, having her take over the Chu family ensures a brighter future. The current prosperity and flourishing state of the Chu family is the best proof of this. When the old patriarch was in charge of the clan, although he was experienced, knowledgeable, and rarely made mistakes, he was too conservative and somewhat arrogant. As a result, many of his decisions were not bold enough, and he was too cautious. Even if the clan developed, the pace was extremely slow. The older generation often tried to pay their respects to him, but were always refused. They could see clearly that the old clan chief was a stubborn man. The extensive knowledge he had in his youth had now become his shackles. They would prefer Chu Yan to lead the Chu family in the future rather than the old patriarch. However, the father and daughter have now become enemies, and what should have been a good thing, the awakening of Saint's fighting power, has been turned into this tense situation. To say I have no regrets would be a lie. Chu Shanha, on the other end, had no time to care about what his subordinates were thinking. He was extremely agitated, and even the loud noise beside him seemed to disappear from his world for a moment. He never imagined that after sleeping for an unknown amount of time, he would wake up to hear the news that his daughter was going to sell the Chu family. When he first heard this, he was pale and felt a chill down his spine, thinking that the Chu family was facing a life-or-death crisis. But when he used his divine sense to investigate, he clearly saw that there was no change in the family. Although there were fewer people, there were no powerful enemies attacking from outside the mountains. At that moment, he breathed a sigh of relief. After learning more about it, he discovered that his daughter wanted to move to the Divine Dynasty because of a casual promise made by the person with double pupils. Although it was for the future development of the clan, in his eyes, it was no different from selling the entire Chu family to pursue his own love. He knew his daughter had feelings for that boy, and he had pretended to make a divine oath as an excuse to try and get his daughter to settle down. But to her surprise, her daughter tested her repeatedly and found a flaw in her lie, which led to their relationship growing cold. Thinking of this, Chu Shanha felt a pang of regret. He regretted that he shouldn't have let Chu Yan go to the Nine Heavens secret realm in the Eastern Divine Continent. Instead, he should have stayed at home. That way, this ill-fated relationship wouldn't have happened. He clenched his fist slightly, feeling a bit resentful towards his daughter. In his memory, the person with double pupils had already broken through to the saint level. Naturally, he dared not hate them, but only blamed his daughter, hating her for not listening to him. After gathering his thoughts for a moment, Chu Shanhe belatedly let out a cold snort, his face showing displeasure. As expected, how could a mere woman be worthy of the position of head of this family? In the end, she will still have to follow another family. The sound was not quiet, breaking the silence that filled the hall. Many clansmen below heard it clearly, their faces showing surprise. They looked up at him, not expecting their clan leader to speak of his daughter in such a way. It seems the saintess's brief tenure as head of the family is about to change hands again. The other members of the other factions shook their heads slightly, feeling somewhat regretful. They had witnessed the holy maiden's methods of managing her household and recognized her talent, which was why they chose to follow her to the heavenly abyss divine dynasty. But given the current situation, it seemed like their efforts would all be in vain. Meanwhile, the other factions that originally disagreed with the relocation were all smiles. As long as Chu Yan didn't become the clan leader, their younger generation still had hope. Only the supporters of Chu Yan's faction changed their expressions drastically, still holding a sliver of hope in their hearts. But not long after, with Chu Shanhe's shout, that glimmer of hope was completely shattered. Effective immediately, due to my daughter's transgressions, she is stripped of her positions as clan leader and saintess. I, Chu Shanhe, will remain the clan leader of the Chu family. Does anyone have any objections? Chu Shanhe's voice was calm and resonant, carrying an unquestionable quality, echoing throughout the entire clan. Chu Shanhe looked down from his high position, surveying the entire hall. His silver robe shimmered with light, and his eyes held the oppressive aura of a saint, inspiring fear in all who beheld him. We have no objections, and respectfully welcome the clan leader back. Everyone spoke in unison, and Chu Yan's faction could only awkwardly bow. There's no other reason than that this position originally belonged to Chu Shanhe. Chu Yan only became the clan leader temporarily because he was asleep. Now that he has awakened, it is truly a return to the rightful owner, and they can't find any other point to refute it. Furthermore, Chu Yan's suggestion to relocate the divine dynasty is to be treated as a joke. From this day forward, I do not wish to hear anyone mention it again. Anyone who speaks of relocating to another power will be treated as a traitor. Chu Shanhe spoke coldly, his gaze sweeping over everyone. Everyone shuddered. Although going to the divine dynasty had many benefits, rumors have been circulating in the Xiantian domain that the crown prince of Tianyuan had killed people from the 3 states who came from the hidden families, saying that the divine dynasty would soon suffer a catastrophic disaster. They were skeptical, but considering the disappearance of the Jun and Z family prodigies on the Xiantian ranking, a thought popped into their heads, and they formed a somewhat obvious judgment. They could still figure out whether to prioritize survival or cultivation. At that moment, everyone had no other thoughts and respectfully replied, "We understand." However, not long after the words were spoken, a clear and cold female voice rang out from the end of the brightly lit corridor. "I disagree." Chapter 581, Setting Up One's Own Business. Chu Shanhe spoke coldly, his gaze sweeping over everyone. Everyone shuddered. Although going to the divine dynasty had many benefits, rumors have been circulating in the Xiantian domain that the crown prince of Tianyuan had killed people from the 3 states who came from the hidden families, saying that the divine dynasty would soon suffer a catastrophic disaster. They were skeptical, but considering the disappearance of the Jun and Z family prodigies on the Xiantian ranking, a thought popped into their heads, and they formed a somewhat obvious judgment. They could still figure out whether to prioritize survival or cultivation. At that moment, everyone had no other thoughts and respectfully replied, "We understand." However, not long after the words were spoken, a clear and cold female voice rang out from the end of the brightly lit corridor. "I disagree." Upon hearing that familiar voice, the elder who had been so devoted to Chu Yan's lineage silently closed his eyes, seemingly anticipating what was about to happen, and felt a pang of sorrow in his heart. Hopefully, the clan chief will show some leniency because she is his own daughter. The rest of the people looked over at the sound, their expressions mostly complicated, while only a small number of them curled their lips into a gloating smile. This small group of people had always been at odds with Chu Yan's faction, and now that they were about to see their nemesis suffer a drastic downfall, they were naturally overjoyed. At the door, the woman in the white and blue jade dress slowly stopped, her teeth clenched, her usually gentle eyes now revealing undisguised anger as she stared directly at the middle-aged man sitting high above. Beside him, an old man in hemp clothing followed silently. His eyes were sharp as arrows ready to be released, and his aura was extremely fierce, making him impossible to ignore. Just one glance from him was enough to make one's eyes sting. Chu Shanhe laughed in anger, his fingers gripping the armrest so tightly they turned ashen. As a saint, His senses were incredibly vast. How could he not know of their arrival? These words were meant for his good-for-nothing daughter to hear, but little did he know that she would dare to contradict him. Very well, very well. He's been gone these past few days, and things have really gotten out of control. Does he really think he's the clan leader just because he was there for a few days? He then suppressed his anger and looked at the figure in hemp clothing. His brows furrowed involuntarily, sensing the man's profound cultivation and the aura emanating from him that made him somewhat uncomfortable. He muttered to himself, where did this unfilial daughter find help? He didn't recognize Qi-Yun at first, but after looking at him several times, he realized that the other person's face was strangely familiar, as if he had seen him a few times in his memory, but he couldn't remember where. After thinking carefully for a while, he still couldn't think of who it was, so he reluctantly gave up and calmly spoke. It's been a few days since I last saw you. You've been the clan leader for a while now, and you've even forgotten how to call me father? Or have you left the Chu family and stopped using the Chu surname? Or perhaps you started your own household? After speaking, Chu Shanhe looked at her with sharp eyes. Having held a high position for many years, he was very experienced in judging people and naturally knew how to suppress such a proud and arrogant person. There's no need to respond to the other party's question immediately. Instead, throw out 3 questions in return. If the other party answers carelessly, the initiative in this conversation will fall into their hands. The more Chu Shanhe looked, the more alarmed he became, a look of astonishment in his eyes. He wondered, when did she break through to the quasi-saint level? He only remembered that before he fell into a coma, this unfilial daughter was only at the peak of the God-King realm. He never expected her progress to be so rapid. No wonder he's gotten so powerful. He's broken through to the quasi-saint level. After thinking it over, a hint of gloom appeared in Chu Shanhe's eyes, but his expression remained calm. Oh, Qi-Yun gave a cold laugh. Now he remembers she's his daughter? Chu Shanhe felt a little uneasy at the cold laugh, but because he was in front of others, he could only brace himself and stand up. He stared straight into those somewhat haggard eyes, and his heart suddenly trembled, feeling somewhat dazed. Chapter 582 Father-Daughter Conflict. Chu Shanhe felt a little uneasy at the cold laugh, but because he was in front of others, he could only brace himself and stand up. He stared straight into those somewhat haggard and disappointed eyes, and his heart suddenly trembled, feeling somewhat dazed. What exactly happened in the 3 states during this period? His thoughts were in turmoil, and he was filled with anger. He hadn't listened to what the elder beside him said, so he was completely unaware of what had happened in the 3 prefectures recently, only managing to grasp a few scattered bits and pieces. For example, the resurgence of the 2 demon kings, the loss of the border, the double battle. Upon careful consideration of these unfamiliar words, he felt a chill run down his spine, and a fine bead of cold sweat appeared on his forehead. As a clan leader, how could he not know what the border was? There were only 2 areas in the central divine continent. One was the wilderness, and the other was the Broken Sky Rift Valley, both of which connected with the far west, where hordes of demonic beasts roamed. These 2 places are now guarded by troops from the Tianyuan Divine Dynasty in one place, and the 8 great families in the other. How could they possibly fall? As for the 2 demon kings mentioned, he had heard of them. Historically, there were only 2 famous demon kings. If it were truly those 2 beings who had revived and led the demon race to invade, putting aside their strength, the sheer number of demons alone would probably be enough to overwhelm the human race. At this moment, the Chu family was unharmed. Only a few people were missing, and everything was as usual. This proved that the elders' talk of a demon invasion was nothing but a joke. It's likely that the other party is old and doesn't recognize what ancient demons like the Little Demon King or Little Demon Queen are. They just think that some mixed-blood sacred birds that have proclaimed themselves kings are demon kings. If those 2 beings were truly resurrected, coupled with the ferocious beasts of the far west, who in the world could stop them? How could the Chu family have survived until now? It's not that serious. This unfilial daughter of mine has probably secretly bribed this clan elder to say a few nice words in my ear to exaggerate her performance in order to gain my approval and secure her position as the head of the family. What a despicable little trick. I was almost fooled by his pitiful act. Sure enough, a bad seed is a bad seed. Chu Shanhe sneered inwardly, taking Qi-Yun's actions as an act, his expression extremely cold. Qi-Yun took in his changes, but her heart was not greatly disturbed. She only found it somewhat amusing. She parted her lips slightly and calmly said, "Ever since you were frightened unconscious by the heavenly demon ape that day, I've taken over all the affairs of the clan, big and small, and worked hard to save the clan from danger. Everything I did was for the sake of the clan. What crime have I committed?" Upon hearing this, some of the elders in the family fell silent, their throats dry. Women are usually sparing with their words, and these words, though seemingly insignificant, reveal the immense effort Qi-Yun had put in behind the scenes. Chu Shanha's face turned ashen. It was a memory he absolutely did not want to recall in his life. But now it was being brought up in front of everyone by his unfilial daughter, who showed him no respect whatsoever. Where could he put his face? As for the second half of his speech, he almost laughed. Compared to his years of hard work for the clan, how tiring could this period of time be? It's all just a tactic to gain sympathy. Chu Shanha suppressed his surging anger and said coldly, "So you say it's all for the family? If you really cared about the family, you wouldn't have moved the entire clan to another's territory. Do you know what this is called? This is called vassalage. You want to vassalize the entire Chu family under the entire Tianyuan divine dynasty to pursue your own selfish desires. Chu Yan, you are truly heartless. How could I have given birth to such a selfish and self-serving person? If our ancestor knew this in the afterlife, he would be so angry he'd vomit blood. After you die, will you have the face to see him?" After saying that, Chu Shanha's anger subsided considerably, replaced by deep disappointment, and he collapsed to the ground, utterly exhausted. However, after these words were spoken, the clan fell silent. Even the sound of a pin dropping was amplified. Everyone gave Chu Shanha a strange look, and then lowered their heads again. Chapter 583 Sage Qi. The divine dynasty is currently at its zenith, like the most dazzling sun in the world, with countless powerful figures beneath it. There are also 4 saint kings who are openly in charge. Its crown prince, the double-pupiled one, is recognized as the #1 genius in the world. With such astonishing resources, no family, sect, or holy land in the 3 states can compare to it. Being able to attach oneself to it seems to be a skill in itself, and certainly not a bad thing. After all, they had never heard of any force that could be on such good terms with the divine dynasty that it could establish a large clan within its territory. Based on Chu Yan's relationship with the crown prince, this could be considered the first case. Moreover, the divine dynasty's sincerity was evident. It was not a perfunctory gesture. Instead, they arranged for their clans to reside in the central capital, in the most prosperous area in the world. If there is any fault to speak of, it is only the recent rumors of a hidden family becoming enemies with the divine dynasty, which has caused widespread panic and made life unbearable for the forces under the righteous alliance. But that's just a rumor. It hasn't been confirmed yet, and nobody knows if it's true or not. If it's true, then those forces that are on good terms with the divine dynasty will be in big trouble. Of course, if it's false, then their relocation, there would be a great opportunity. In short, being a vassal under the divine dynasty was not as terrifying as the clan leader imagined. Chu Yan raised her beautiful eyes slightly and looked at him in surprise. She hadn't expected her father to put such a big label on her right away. Her pretty face immediately darkened, and she felt a chill in her heart. He probably doesn't even know what happened recently, yet he so easily pins the blame on himself. What a good father of mine. Chu Yan was by no means someone who would easily give in. She was naturally quick-witted and intelligent, and once she made a decision, there was no question of going back on it. It was all the result of careful consideration. Moreover, the people from the divine dynasty were still by her side, so how could she break her promise? Therefore, no matter what, she is determined to fight her father today. Sitting in his high position, Chu Shanha naturally noticed the strange expressions on the faces of the people in his clan. He thought to himself, perhaps what happened is somewhat different from what I thought. However, words spoken are like water spilled. Even though Chu Shanha's heart was filled with ripples, he could only keep a cold face and look down below. No matter what happened, for him, and for his current position as clan leader, moving a family out would be unfilial, a betrayal of the clan, and disrespect for the ancestors. This was already a direct hit to his sore spot, especially since it was said by his own daughter. He felt even more ashamed and wished he could commit suicide in front of the ancestral temple to question his ancestors and martyrs. Soon, the woman's gentle voice rang out again, neither humble nor arrogant, echoing throughout the hall. The relocation has been decided, and the list of those to be relocated has been submitted to the divine dynasty. Both parties have an agreement that cannot be easily changed, otherwise the consequences will be borne by more than just the clan chief. Chu Yan stepped forward slightly, raising her bright eyes. Her pupils were slightly red, like rosy clouds, and the aura she exuded was intense and otherworldly. She had cultivated the Emperor-grade technique, Crimson Cloud Immortal Proving Technique from the Chu ancestors' decree, and had now reached the minor completion stage. She stood calmly in the hall, looking around. No one dared to meet her gaze. She knelt on the ground, feeling only a chill beneath her. At this moment, Chu Yan is no longer the naive Chu family saintess she once was. Having broken through to the quasi-saint realm for a long time, and having been baptized by the Double Gate battle, she now holds a high position, and her fair face already exudes a faint saintly aura. Without giving Chu Shanhe a chance to speak, Chu Yin looked at Qi Yun beside her and said respectfully, "This senior is the envoy from the Divine Dynasty, Sage Qi, who was the protector of the former crown prince and is now in charge of my family's relocation." Chapter 580, For we hope the nobles will think deeply. After he finished speaking, the faces of the Chu family members around him changed drastically. They all looked at the old man in hemp clothing with horror. Chu Shanhe above was no better off. Although his face was calm, his heart was in turmoil. He gripped the jade armrest beside him slightly, gave Chu Yin a deep look, and immediately understood why she was so confident. She had been holding back this trick. However, what angered him even more was this unfilial daughter. She actually dared to hand over her family to someone else so easily while he was away. She was utterly foolish and didn't even care if the news of her Chu ancestor token was leaked. Upon thinking of the Chu ancestor's decree, Chu Shanhe's expression changed slightly. It was as if the situation before him suddenly became clear, and everything became traceable. A chill ran through him. I'm afraid this divine dynasty is after my family's Chu ancestor token, so they set up this trap to make this unfilial daughter happily send her out of the family. Alas, this is truly a calamity for my family. He sighed inwardly, his thoughts racing for only a moment before he quickly forced a hearty smile and cupped his hands towards Qi Yun below, saying, "So it's fellow Taoist Qi. I've long heard that your archery skills are unparalleled in this era, which has filled me with admiration. Now that we have the opportunity to meet, we must have a long chat." Although Chu Shanhe wore a smile on his face, he was frantically thinking in his heart about how to minimize the losses. Upon hearing this, Qi Yun returned the greeting with a few words, his eyes deep and thoughtful, thinking to himself that this Chu family patriarch was no ordinary person. As for Chu Yin borrowing his power, he was well aware of it, but he didn't pay too much attention to it. After all, she had a special identity and was very likely to become the crown prince's concubine in the future, so he couldn't be careless. Moreover, this matter concerns the Divine Dynasty. The Divine Dynasty has already made preparations. If the other party refuses at this crucial juncture, although the crown prince will not have any objections, it is hard to say what will happen to the other members of the Divine Dynasty. It is no joke to arbitrarily label someone as a breach of contract. The crown prince must have considered this relationship, which is why he sent him out this time, hoping that he could help the other party and avoid unnecessary trouble or a too embarrassing situation. After a moment's thought, Qi Yun formed a rough assessment of the current situation. Today, no matter what, we must stand firmly behind Saint Chu. As for how well we can win her over, that's up to her fate. Chu Shanhe still wore a smile on his face, took a sip of tea, and inadvertently glanced at Chu Yin, sighing. "I made quite a few laughs just now. Please forgive me, fellow Taoist, but I'm sure you're already aware of the current situation. I'll keep it short and sweet. I just want to ask you, fellow Taoist, is there still any room for maneuver in this matter? After all, during my recuperation period, my daughter took it upon herself to sell off the family business, which was not my wish. From beginning to end, I was completely unaware of anything about it. It's not that relocating the Divine Dynasty is a bad thing, but this matter came too suddenly, and I can't accept it for the time being. The relocation of an entire clan is no small matter and requires careful consideration. I hope the nobles can understand us and withdraw this order." Chu Shanhe's words were incredibly sincere, even slightly moving Qi Yun. However, this was not a decision he could make alone, so he immediately responded decisively. "Fellow Taoist Chu, I understand what you're saying to me, but I'm powerless to help. This matter is of great importance. Those important figures are all watching the relocation of the nobles, and it cannot be changed lightly. If we are blamed, it will be a burden that neither of us can bear. I hope you will think this through." Chapter 585, Changes in People's Hearts. His implication was clear. Talking to me is useless. I'm just someone who gets things done. If you want to find someone, go find the person in charge. Moreover, Qi Yun's words also subtly hinted that the higher-ups were watching the relocation closely, and if things went wrong or had any consequences, they shouldn't blame him for not saying so. As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Shanhe's face stiffened. He hadn't expected the situation to be so serious. The Divine Dynasty is one that cannot be offended, but the Chu family cannot simply move there and end up being forgotten once they leave Chu City. Is the roster finalized? Chu Shanhe had noticed the silk scroll in his hand long ago. Now, as if he had thought of something, he hurriedly asked a question, even forgetting to say fellow Taoist in his haste. Upon hearing this, Qi Yin didn't speak immediately. He glanced at Chu Yin beside him, and seeing her calm and fearless expression, shook his head and said, "The relocation date hasn't arrived yet, so it's not confirmed. These dates can still be changed. After 7 days, everything will be settled and cannot be altered." Chu Shanhe breathed a sigh of relief, his expression softening. If things could be changed, there was still room for redemption. He was also glad that he woke up at this time. If it had been any later, his house would probably have been deserted and there would have been very few people left. Fellow Taoist, may I have a look at these rosters of our clan so that I can have a better understanding of the situation? Chu Shanha spoke very politely, his eyes fixed on the silk scroll in the old man's hand, his expression sincere. He wasn't blind to Chu Yan's confident demeanor just now, so he naturally saw it clearly, which made him slightly uneasy. He used his divine sense to explore the ancestral land and found that the Chu ancestor token had not been moved, so he breathed a slight sigh of relief. If Chu Zuling was not taken away, then where does this unfilial daughter get the confidence to be so self-assured? It's probably because the problem is on the list. The old man in hemp robes glanced at him silently. Being an old and shrewd man, how could he not know what the other party was thinking? However, since even the holy maiden Chu herself didn't care, why should he cause trouble? He then waved his robe, and the crystal silk scroll flew to Chu Shanha's front. Thank you, fellow Taoist. Chu Shanha accepted the list with both hands, thanked him, and then pretended to look through it, but in reality he scanned it with his divine sense and had already read the entire list. They're all young members of the clan. If we really move there for this unfilial daughter, wouldn't that cause the Chu family line to end? This woman is truly heartless. Chu Shanha was both shocked and terrified. His fingers trembled slightly, and a sense of lingering fear and relief welled up in the depths of his eyes. Thank goodness, she didn't actually succeed. After the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, the Chu family patriarch, who was seated at the head of the table, slowly raised his head. His face was extremely somber, revealing nothing of his thoughts. He looked at the young woman standing in the hall, his eyes cold, his voice authoritative without anger, and said, "Are they all willing to go with you? Or is it just your wishful thinking that you've included their names on your own?" Chu Yin was confident and naturally unafraid to meet his gaze, her attitude unyielding. "Of course I'm willing to go with you." Long before, she had explained the many advantages and disadvantages of going to the Divine Dynasty to the younger generation of the clan. Perhaps because of her own reputation as the second genius on the Xiantian ranking, the number of young clansmen willing to go exceeded her expectations. Chu Yin had her own concerns about not considering sending older members of the clan. First, these people are hard to persuade, they're used to staying in the clan and are unwilling to go far away. Second, because it is a place that the Divine Dynasty will definitely fight for, we are afraid that these elders will not be able to adapt to the land and water. Third, if something unexpected happens in the future, the Chu family will not be cut off. Very well, then I shall ask, are all those on the list in the palace willing to go with him? Seeing her like this, Chu Shanha was both amused and annoyed. His previous feigned gentleness vanished instantly, and his cold gaze swept over the crowd crawling below. Today, when he awoke, all those present in the hall were members of the main lineage and direct descendants. Although there were only a few hundred people, many of them were young members of the clan listed on the roster. As the words fell, many young clansmen stood up and said respectfully, "We were not coerced by the Holy Maiden. We went willingly. Once one is enough, another will follow." Soon, other young people spoke up tremblingly, all saying that they went to the Divine Dynasty voluntarily and were not threatened by Chu Yin. Chu Shanha trembled with rage, his eyes tightly shut, and he remained silent. His saintly aura was leaking out uncontrollably, causing the faces of the clansmen below to change. The younger generation who had spoken earlier all lowered their heads, cold sweat pouring down their faces. He had no idea what methods his daughter had used to brainwash these young people in the group, making them so determined to choose each other. If it weren't for the presence of that Divine Dynasty sage, he would have used force to arrest and imprison this unfilial daughter, and then release her after these few years had passed and the double-pupiled one had completely gone to the upper realm. But it was all just wishful thinking. Right now, not only did the other side have the support of a sage, but they also enjoyed the hearts of their own people. There seemed to be a powerful force threatening to overthrow them. Chu Shanha suddenly awoke with a start. Could it be that all of this was a scheme orchestrated by the Sage King in the dark? Only a saintly king can influence someone's mind so subtly and without anyone noticing. Chu Shanha slumped into his seat, a chill running down his spine. He was filled with fear, but the thought of his daughter's rebellious nature fueled his anger. Those listed here will be demoted to collateral branches of the Chu family, and the direct descendants will be stripped of their direct line status. They will never be allowed to set foot in the main clan again. If you are willing to repent and reform within these 7 days, the clan will reward you with a sacred grade cultivation technique, and your salary will be of the highest rank. Your past transgressions will be forgiven. Chu Shanha's icy voice instantly resounded throughout the entire family. The Chu ancestor token has no shortage of sacred-grade cultivation techniques and resources. Even a little bit of residue is enough to feed the Chu family. This has always been the source of his confidence. Chu Yan's expression changed, and even the direct descendants in the hall were somewhat shaken, their expressions shifting. They never imagined that the consequences of relocating to the main clan would be so severe, even stripping them of their status as direct descendants. If they don't go to the Divine Dynasty and stay in the clan, they can not only cultivate Saint-grade techniques, but also have their previous stipends raised 3 levels. At this moment, some elders in the clan had their eyes shining as they secretly communicated with their offspring. After seeing this, even if we lose the chance to break through to the Saint King realm, this saintly cultivation technique is enough for us to enjoy wealth and honor, and our path to enlightenment will be worry-free. Furthermore, judging from the recent rumors, no one from the Divine Dynasty has come forward to clarify them, making it difficult to determine their truth or falsehood. If the reclusive family truly retaliates, we will face annihilation. I hope you will consider this carefully. Chu Shanhe looked down at everything without any change in expression. He knew that some people were destined to follow his unfilial daughter, and everything he was doing now was just to minimize the impact. As for how much can be salvaged, he doesn't want much. 50% is enough. All right, all of you step back. He addressed the crowd, then bowed to Qi Yun in apology, indicating that it was inconvenient today and that they could talk again another day. Qi Yun gave her a deep look, silently bowed, and left with the woman in the white and blue dress beside him, whose face was not looking well. Chapter 586, When the Immortal Slaughters the Divine Dynasty. Once the room was empty, the smile on Chu Shanhe's face gradually vanished, replaced by a calm expression. His eyes were as dark as an abyss, and he tapped his fingers on the jade armrest beside him, remaining silent. After a long silence, Chu Shanhe clenched his fists involuntarily, slamming them heavily on the jade table with a loud thud. His voice was suppressed and cold as he spoke, word by word. What a divine dynasty! What an unfilial daughter! In all his years of life, Chu Shanhe had never suffered such humiliation in his own home. His own daughter, whom he had raised with his own hands, was trying to plunder the family fortune from outsiders, and as the head of the family, he could only watch helplessly, even having to smile obsequiously at the outsiders for fear of angering them. His cowardly and weak appearance made him hate himself even more, and he hated his daughter and the Divine Dynasty even more. If only I hadn't given that unfilial daughter such power in the first place. Now that her wolfish ambitions are known throughout the clan, who can stop her? Chu Shanhe secretly regretted it, his fingers almost drawing blood from his palm. Not long after, he called out with a cold expression. Chuan. A large figure suddenly appeared in front of him, wearing a yellow turban. He had an ordinary appearance and looked to be about 35 or 36 years old. His aura was very solid, and he was at the peak of the God King level. This was a trusted confidant whom Chu Shanhe had been secretly cultivating, and the only person he could currently trust. Grown-ups. Chuan knelt on one knee, not daring to raise his head, and said respectfully. Hearing that familiar voice, Chu Shanhe felt much calmer. He closed his eyes and said, Chuan, tell me everything that has happened in the 3 prefectures these past few days, without omitting a single word. I want to see how long those people will keep this secret for this unfilial daughter. His tone was calm, without much emotion, but to Chuan, the words spoken by the sage before him were chilling. Yes. Chuan kept his head down, responded, and then quickly revealed what he knew. About the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, Chu Shanhe's expression changed drastically. His eyes filled with horror, and he murmured, What did you say? Those 2 demon kings really have revived. The one with double pupils first killed the lesser demon king in the wilderness, and then killed the lesser demon king in the longevity pass, both times with overwhelming force. Of those tens of millions of demon soldiers, did the one with double pupils alone kill most of them? And he even signed a righteous alliance with the various factions. Even the members of the reclusive families who went north this time, have all of them died? In an instant, these messages flooded into Chu Shanhe's mind like thunderclaps, causing him to stop breathing and his pupils to contract. He hadn't expected that the elders hadn't lied to him. It was all true. All true. Some say that if it weren't for the double-pupiled ones and the Divine Dynasty, the Central Divine Continent would have been slaughtered by the demon race long ago, and the human race would be in imminent danger. Chuan added with a slightly bitter expression. Chu Shanhe was in a daze, and it took him a long time to come back to his senses. His body was trembling, and he could hardly speak. No wonder that unfilial daughter was willing to lead her people to relocate to that Divine Dynasty. No wonder. Is the crown prince of that Divine Dynasty even human? At this moment, Chu Shanhe didn't even dare to utter the words double pupils. his face filled with fear. Faced with a surefire candidate for sainthood, he dared not harbor any resentment. Unless he possessed an absolute means to kill his opponent, he wouldn't dare reveal even a hint of pleasure under the sway of this divine dynasty. After calming down, Chu Shanha pondered for a moment and vaguely said, "This righteous alliance, is it perhaps a scheme by them to monitor us?" As someone in high position, how could he not understand the significance of the divine dynasty's actions? By combining kindness and severity, with one playing the good cop and the other the bad cop, who among the cultivators in the world would dare to disobey? He saw the situation clearly, his eyes wide open, his bloodshot eyes practically bulging out. With this imperial decree in place, will the Chu family truly have any chance of turning their fortunes around in the future? Seeing his appearance, Chuan also knelt down in fear and trepidation, not daring to raise his head even slightly, and said in a trembling voice, "However, recently there have been rumors that the two reclusive families in Tianhai intend to retaliate against the divine dynasty. Now, the cultivators under the Righteous Path Alliance are all on tenterhooks, walking on thin ice." Upon hearing this, Chu Shanha laughed out loud. Memories that had been buried in his mind for many years, the fear of going south when he was young, were awakened once again. He immediately cried and laughed, as if he had gone mad, and let out that hoarse, chilling laugh. How dare someone oppose an immortal? How dare someone offend an immortal? Chuan lowered his head even further, his body trembling. At that moment, he wished he could cut off his own ears so that he would be deaf and unable to hear anything. He had followed the clan chief for many years, and this was the first time he had seen him so out of control, to the point that it instilled a strange fear in him. After a few breaths, the laughter gradually stopped. Chu Shanha lifted Chu Yan's head, his eyes no longer filled with despair, but rather seemed to ignite with a flame. He stared straight at Chu Yan and sneered. "When that immortal slaughters the entire dynasty, remember, go and collect the body of that unfilial daughter. I want her to die with her eyes wide open, her body kneeling before her ancestors, descending to the yellow springs in fear." "Yes, yes." Chuan could barely speak. A chill ran through him, and he could only echo and respond. As soon as he finished speaking, feeling the immense force on his head disappear, Chu Yan's pupils dilated, and he gasped for breath before collapsing to the ground like a dead dog. Chu Shanha didn't even glance at him. He turned away, pacing back and forth, his silver robes fluttering in the wind. His expression was utterly indifferent as he thought to himself, "Once this divine dynasty crumbles, the righteous alliance will naturally collapse like a pile of loose sand. At that time, all we need to do is offer up Chu Yan and the others who went to the divine dynasty lineage. With the entire clan united, we will be safe and sound. We might even be able to become disciples of an immortal, exchanging a tale of spiritual energy from the Chu ancestor token for their protection." Chu Shanha closed his eyes briefly, still feeling somewhat uneasy. After a while, as if he had thought of something, his eyes widened. If that divine dynasty is not destroyed this time, and there's also the upcoming Immortal Ascension Conference, the Upper Realm experts will have the grudge against the divine dynasty for killing their disciples, and they will be able to wipe them out without leaving a trace. Chapter 587 Fearless. Tianyuan Divine Dynasty. Hall of Governance. The Hall of Governance was established by King Tianyuan to handle state affairs on a regular basis. It was of moderate size and laid out in an extremely low-key manner. Outside the hall, there were many spiritual herbs and flowers, and a spiritual stream flowed straight through it, occasionally emitting a misty fairy light, creating a magnificent scene of immortals. Aside from the time spent in the imperial court, King Tianyuan spent the most time here. After finishing his political affairs, he would cultivate all night until the rooster crowed and the sun rose. He was extremely self-disciplined, which earned him the respect of everyone in the court. After informing the guard stationed outside the gate, Su Ming also looked at the gate, feeling quite emotional. Having held a high position for a long time, the fear that had once lingered in his eyes had completely vanished. Dressed in a magnificent purple prime minister's robe, although his cultivation was not high, his every move exuded the majesty of a prime minister. However, the slightly weathered middle-aged man quickly came to his senses. Thinking about the current situation, he couldn't help but sigh softly, and a look of anxiety appeared in his eyes. Normally, His Majesty's peace and quiet should not be disturbed unless there is something urgent. However, this matter is pressing, and envoys from all sides have gathered in the palace. Even the envelopes sent to his desk are piled up like a small mountain. I had no choice but to come. I wonder if His Majesty is inside the palace. After a short while, Su Ming entered the palace under the respectful gaze of the guards. He quickened his pace and arrived at the main hall in the blink of an eye. Looking at the emperor who was writing documents in the distance with a leisurely expression, Su Ming immediately knelt down. Before he could even speak, the middle-aged man, enveloped in dragon energy, spoke without raising his head. Prime Minister Su, what is it that you have come in person? Although the Hall of Governance was quiet, some old friends would still visit Nangong Chen on weekdays. Nangong Chen hoped to keep in touch with them more often, so he assumed that this old friend had come to chat again, and his face remained quite calm. Upon hearing this, Su Ming first bowed and then quickly said, "Your Majesty, recently, some scoundrel in the 3 states has been spreading rumors that the long-lost members of a reclusive family were all killed by the Crown Prince, and that the family is planning to come to the Divine Dynasty to seek revenge. This has caused widespread panic within the Righteous Alliance. Even the letters sent to the Divine Dynasty are piled up like mountains, and envoys from all sides are practically breaking down the palace gates, all gathered in the court waiting for a reply. Your Majesty has dispatched the Tianyuan army to search for the person who spread this rumor and has quickly brought it under control within the Divine Dynasty." Nangong Chen stopped writing, looked up at the slightly nervous man kneeling on the ground, a strange glint flashing in his eyes. He didn't say anything, but pondered. He had anticipated this day would come, but he hadn't expected it to come so soon. After all, that kid didn't try to hide anything when he made his move. Although he erased most of the traces, someone with a discerning, I can always find something if they look carefully. The reason they didn't hide it is simple. There was no need. Back when his own son destroyed the Dharma body of the Jun family's heir in the 9-heaven secret realm, and when the Z family was chasing Su Li, he had already formed an irreconcilable feud with those 2 hidden families. He didn't know whether the reclusive families were feigning deafness or ignorance, but the Divine Dynasty had already made preparations and was not acting without confidence. Chapter 588, Asking the Court. Now, including Laozi, there are 6 saint kings in the court. Even back in the era before the laws of heaven and earth awakened, we could roam freely, comparable to a great immortal sect. What is there to fear from just 2 declining, reclusive families? However, even a starved camel is bigger than a horse. These 2 have dominated the Xiantian domain for so long, and even now they can go out to meet Saint Kings, so they still have some foundation. Not to mention, they also have connections with the upper realm. They cannot be underestimated. Fine. If you really push me too far, don't blame me for using what the child's mother left behind to overturn this chessboard. Thinking of this, a ruthless glint appeared in Nangong Zhan's eyes, and an invisible imperial aura poured out, making the surroundings feel cold. Su Ming had been observing his opponent, although the imperial aura was now overwhelming, causing his face to flush red, his breathing to stop, and the bones in his body to creak. He was filled with joy, as if he had not felt the pressure at all, and he breathed a long sigh of relief. It seems His Majesty must have a plan to deal with the revenge of the reclusive families. Soon, the imperial aura dissipated, and the king at the head of the table, clad in a dragon robe, seemed to sense something. The corners of his mouth turned up slightly, and the bone-chilling coldness in his eyes gradually turned into peace. 2 figures, one in white and one in black, appeared in the hall at some unknown time. The silver boots landed lightly on the ground, and the snow robe fluttered without wind. The boy's eyes were particularly striking, radiating a terrifying, eerie light. No matter how many times Su Ming had seen him, he still couldn't help but feel a sense of panic. Not to mention, the other party was now a true great sage, the strongest person below the Sage King. Beside the young man stood a stunningly beautiful young woman, her black phoenix dress swaying in the breeze, her eyes smiling. Although her aura was more restrained than the previous one, she was still a powerful god king, which made Su Ming, who was only at the great power level, feel a chill run down his spine. The newcomers were none other than Nangong Chen and Zhu Ying. Greetings to King Tianyuan and Prime Minister Su. Zhu Ying bowed slightly, her voice melodious and pleasant. Nangong Chen, standing beside her, didn't stop, easily grabbing a chair and sitting down before slowly turning his gaze to the 3 people in the hall, his posture extremely relaxed. Nangong Zhan's smile never faded. He nodded slightly to Zhu Ying, then looked at Nangong Chen and said with a smile, "You're such a busy guy, it's been so long. I had to call you to come. You're putting on airs even more than me." After saying that, he looked at Su Ming kneeling below the stage and said softly, "Old man Su, you've worked hard too. Go down first. You're so old. Don't bear all the burdens alone. As for those envoys gathered in the court, just find someone to send them away. Whether that reclusive family seeks revenge or not is none of their business. What are they worried about? If they want to escape, they should leave now. Oh, and remember to make them pay the penalty for breach of contract." Su Ming then raised his head with a sigh of relief, secretly memorizing every word, and said, "Your Majesty, I will certainly convey the imperial decree. I am deeply grateful for your Majesty's concern." Su Ming stood up, nodded slightly to Zhu Ying, and then looked at the white-clad youth sitting on the purple throne with trepidation, saying respectfully, "Your humble servant greets your highness the crown prince." "You're too kind, Prime Minister Su. There's no need for such formalities between us." After remaining silent for a long time, Nangong Chen finally spoke, his expression gentle. With a flick of his sleeve, a delicate force gently helped Su Ming up. Su Ming gave the father and son a deep look, feeling a little warm inside, but he didn't linger and left without stopping. After he had completely left, Zhu Ying stepped forward to make tea for Nangong Chen. Her demeanor was elegant, and she exuded a faint fragrance of jasmine. Her amber eyes were particularly focused. Old Su is just that kind of person. The older he gets, the more rigid he becomes. He's always talking about hierarchy and etiquette, and this trend is gradually spreading throughout the court. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. Nangong Chen shook his head and said something. It is naturally a good thing. Knowing the hierarchy and maintaining order between superiors and inferiors will make it easier for us to govern. If superiors and inferiors do not understand etiquette, there will be no order and chaos will easily arise. Nangong Chen responded calmly. Upon hearing this, Nangong Chen glanced at him with some surprise, smiled, and teased, "I never imagined that you, who used to play around, would have such strategic acumen. It seems that what people say is true. You spent the first half of your life hiding your talents. Even your old man misjudged you. If this position falls to you in the future, you will only do a better job than me." Nangong Chen waved his hand, skipping the topic, took a sip of tea, looked at the middle-aged man with thick eyebrows and big eyes, and then spoke. "Has news of the person I killed spread?" Upon hearing this, Nangong Chen adjusted his posture, his gaze fixed on the distance. He knew his son was intelligent from a young age, capable of deducing many things in just a few words, so he didn't intend to hide it from him. His tone was calm. "That's right. Not only that, the spies left behind by the reclusive family in the 3 states are also spreading rumors that they want to take revenge on us. The forces of the Righteous Alliance are in a real panic. Even top-tier forces like the Li family, the Jiang family, and the Howren Pavilion, while not making any obvious moves, have been secretly gathering information these past few days, trying to see what the court is planning. It seems they are really panicked." With his imperial robes fluttering, the usually aloof King Tianyuan now had deep eyes, staring intently at the scene outside the door, as if he could see through the imposing threshold the moves made by various forces in the court. Zhu Ying, who was pouring tea, stiffened slightly. She had heard rumors recently, but thought they were just rumors. She didn't expect them to be true. His master had even wiped out the Jun family. Nangong Chen remained silent for a long time before speaking. Panic is inevitable. It would be strange if we weren't panicking. After all, who in the 3 states isn't afraid of the reputation of that reclusive family? However, I wonder when this reclusive family will arrive. I am not far from going into seclusion. Perhaps, to avoid any unforeseen changes, we can strike first and catch them off guard. After speaking, Nangong Chen looked up at the sky with a calm expression, as if he could see himself getting closer and closer to that heaven. A cold glint flashed in his eyes. He didn't care about the sect leader's robes protecting him. The safety of the people from the divine dynasty was the real concern. Nangong Chen blocked out their voices before smiling. "What's the rush? Breakthrough first. Your cultivation is more important than anything else. Even if the sky falls, we'll hold it up. There's no need for a junior like you to take action. Moreover, it will take an unknown number of days to cross the heavenly sea. If we waste our cultivation time on the journey, it would be a huge loss. Just let them come, and we'll trap them like turtles in a jar. I have the trump card your mother left behind. They can't do anything to us. Trump cards? Once you use them, you'll have one less. It's better to save them if you can. It's not worth it to use them against them." Nangong Chen had always known that his mother had left many good things for his father before she passed away, so he wasn't surprised and shook his head. Nangong Chen nodded slightly. "What you said makes sense, but who knows what tricks the other side is up their sleeve. All we can do is react to whatever comes our way. However, there's no need to worry too much. The Divine Dynasty now has a total of 6 saint kings, which is extraordinary and enough to make these hidden families think carefully. 6? Where did these 6 come from? Nangong Chen glanced at him, puzzled. Could it be that someone has recently made a breakthrough? Nangong Chen chuckled, then stopped trying to hide his imperial aura. Nangong Chen frowned slightly, his mind deeply shaken. My father has actually broken through to the Saint King realm? Wait, didn't he just break through to the Saint realm? How could he cultivate so quickly? Surely he doesn't have some kind of cheat code. Fortunately, Zhu Ying was isolated. Otherwise, this pressure from the Saint King could have caused the God King to perish on the spot. Nangong Chen was also observing Nangong Chen. Seeing that he only frowned slightly and did not react much, he was somewhat shocked. How far has this kid progressed? Even the pressure from a Saint King has no effect on him. He only feels a little uncomfortable. He knew all too well how terrifying the Saint King was. He was a completely different concept from a saint. He could easily wipe out a saint, let alone deter a saint. Seeing Nangong Chen looking at him suspiciously, Nangong Chen coughed lightly, his cultivation immediately reverting to the mid-stage of the saint realm, and said, "This is nothing more than the wonder of the imperial dragon vein. After I ascended the throne, I don't know how much time had passed, but the 3 words Emperor's inspection of heaven automatically appeared in my mind." Fearing that Nangong Chen might not understand, he continued to explain. Later I learned that Emperor's celestial tour is a divine power. As long as one is within the territory of the Divine Dynasty, one can maintain a cultivation level that is 1 level higher than a major realm. However, once one leaves the divine power, it will become ineffective. This, Nangong Chen was greatly shocked. He had never expected that the imperial dragon vein would possess such heaven-defying wonders. But considering that this was, after all, an imperial dragon vein, the highest level celestial dragon vein, Nangong Chen felt somewhat relieved. Unfortunately, this supernatural power is only effective within the Divine Dynasty and can only be used on the current monarch. Its limitations are quite significant. Nangong Chen thought with a hint of regret. So now you know why we're trying to trap the Divine Dynasty like a turtle in a jar. Nangong Chen spoke meaningfully, then continued. It's a pity that my original cultivation method does not belong to the human emperor's path, and I can't change my cultivation method now. Otherwise, I feel that I can resonate more with this imperial dragon vein. Nangong Chen nodded slightly. The human emperor's path is a forbidden technique. If one is not of the human emperor's bloodline or the ruler of a country, the practitioner will either have their meridians scattered by the domineering imperial aura or explode and die. Therefore, ordinary people would avoid this type of training method when choosing a training method in their childhood. Of course, the scarcity of this type of training method is also a factor. I remember that Lan Xin of the Wuling clan awakened the human emperor physique. Does she have any special qualities? Nangong Chen seemed to remember something and asked. Nangong Chen shook his head. I've asked around. Aside from her faster cultivation speed, there are no other unusual phenomena. Even the cultivation techniques of the human emperor lineage are now suppressed by my imperial aura in the court. Her cultivation method is not suitable for being a subject. What do you think if you married her and made her the emperor? If she were to become a monarch with her emperor physique, wow, that would be incredible. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that she would soar to the heavens, and she might even be able to cultivate faster than you are now. Besides, I can tell that girl is interested in you too. She's pretty, has an exotic look, and is very outgoing and confident, which is rare among women in the 3 states. Nangong Chen flashed his white teeth and stepped forward to pat him on the shoulder. As long as they're your own people, it doesn't matter who is emperor, since you're not going to be emperor anyway. They'll all be helping you govern the country. Chapter 589 on the way. Today's update will be later. Nangong Chen shook his head, skipped the topic, and talked about the Chu family's plan to relocate to the capital and the Liu family's plan to rebuild the Tianyuan Pavilion in the Divine Dynasty. After he finished speaking, Nangong Chen glanced at him, his eyes lighting up, and said, "You're quite something, kid. You even managed to poach the Chu family. They're different from the forces under the jurisdiction of the Righteous Alliance. If they come to our capital, they'll truly be on the same boat." As for Tianyuan Pavilion, our newly established Divine Dynasty is in dire need of experience in managing and operating large-scale chambers of commerce. Your Uncle Ming has been complaining to me about it these past few days. It can be said to be a headache for the Divine Dynasty. With the assistance of the Heavenly Treasure Pavilion, the Divine Dynasty's economy will surely soar and rise to prominence. Okay, I'll send someone to hand over these 2 matters after they're done, don't worry. Nangong Chen lowered his eyes and sipped his tea. After he finished speaking, he asked, "Why hasn't Grandpa arrived yet?" This was his main purpose in coming here today, to get some guidance from his grandfather before he went into seclusion. It's probably still being digested. Nangong Chen responded without hesitation, then glanced at the sky and said, It's your old habit of mine to delay for half a day or several days before leaving the pass. You could just wait in the palace. Nangong Chen shook his head slightly, looking at the Chen character token in his hand that remained motionless, his eyes calm. Nangong Chen had obviously noticed it too, since he also had this little gadget. He couldn't help but think of something and chuckled as he spoke. You know what? This little gadget you forged is really useful. It can transmit sound from a great distance, and it's incredibly clear. If this kind of magic weapon were in the outside world, you probably couldn't buy it even if you had the money. Upon hearing this, Nangong Chen glanced at him and said indifferently, "It can not only transmit sound, but also teleport, but I can only teleport to your place, so don't lose it." The Chen character token was something he casually made because he thought that transmitting sound over a distance was too far. To make things more convenient, he simply gave one to everyone around him. Nangong Chen smiled, but did not respond. How could he possibly lose it? This was the only gift he had ever received from his son. Since Su Li disappeared, this child has given a token to everyone close to him, which shows how much he values those around him. This little gadget is a space-type magic weapon, which is quite difficult to make. The only famous one of this kind of magic weapon in the entire Xiantian domain is the Sound Transmission Stone. However, the Sound Transmission Stone is not only expensive and rare, but its transmission range is also extremely small, only able to transmit within a prefecture, let alone a country or region. This Qin character token not only allows for unimpeded communication throughout the entire Xiantian domain, but also has a teleportation effect, making it incredibly powerful. But his son selflessly gave them such a precious gift. He's truly my dear son. At this moment, Nangong Chen was deeply moved, and his gaze towards Nangong Chen softened considerably. Upon sensing this strange gaze, Nangong Chen's lips twitched, and he silently took a few steps back. Zhu Ying, standing to the side, was completely unaware of anything. From her perspective, the two of them remained motionless, simply drinking their tea. Not long after, as the void within the hall tore open, an old man with white hair and a wildly dancing ink-black sword emerged from it. Chapter 5: 90 Supernatural Powers. This is a discarded chapter, slightly modified and unrelated to the main text. Inside the hall, incense smoke curled from a golden censer. Nangong Chen's fingertips caressed the warm, smooth jade porcelain teacup, his gaze fixed on the rising steam, seemingly lost in thought, or perhaps simply waiting. Seeing his expression, Nangong Chen couldn't help but chuckle, shaking his head and saying, "You've always been like this since you were little. You keep 10 things on your mind, but only show 3/10 of your calm on your face." As he spoke, he poured himself another cup of spiritual tea, his tone tinged with emotion. The Chu family has been rooted in the southern border for 1,000 years, a large and deep-rooted tree with many branches and leaves. To persuade them to move their entire clan north and join my divine dynasty. Chinner, although I haven't witnessed the hardships involved, I can imagine them. You did very well. He paused, his knuckles lightly tapping the table, producing a crisp, soft sound. As for Tianyuan Pavilion, I've dealt with that old man from the Liu family in the past. He's an extremely shrewd man, one who won't act until he sees a clear benefit. His bet on the divine dynasty is probably more than just an optimism about its future. He raised his eyes, his gaze sharp, and looked at Nangong Chen. You gave him conditions he couldn't refuse, didn't you? Nangong Chen didn't even lift his eyelashes, only saying calmly, "It's just a mutual benefit. The divine dynasty has just been established, and everything needs to be rebuilt, especially trade routes and financial resources, which are vital to its survival. The Liu family has the experience, connections, and channels readily available. What they lack is an opportunity to break free from the constraints of the old alliance and reach a higher level. I have given them this opportunity, so they naturally have to show their utmost sincerity." What a perfect reciprocity! Nangong Chen clapped his hands, his eyes filled with even more admiration. You see things clearly, you grasp them accurately, and you handle them steadily. The other day, Lao Ming and I had a long talk until late at night. He was worried that although the national treasury was full, it lacked a sophisticated way of operating it. It was like a child carrying gold and jade in the marketplace, which was not a long-term solution. The arrival of Tianyuan Pavilion is like rain after a long drought. Chinner, you have truly relieved the court of a great worry this time. As he spoke, he suddenly remembered something and took out the palm-sized, cool-to-the-touch token with the character Chun from his robes, examining it closely. The token was neither gold nor jade, its texture mysterious, its surface shimmering with a faint starlight. In the center was an ancient seal script character Chun, its strokes vigorous, subtly rippling with spatial energy. He infused a barely perceptible wisp of spiritual power into the token, causing it to glow softly and another token on Nangong Chen's person also resonated subtly. The wonder of this object is truly a masterpiece of craftsmanship. Nangong Chen sighed, his tone filled with undisguised pride and emotion. Not to mention Xintian domain. Even looking at the surrounding domains, the means of communication are nothing more than those cumbersome, expensive, and restrictive sound transmission stones. When has there ever been such a rare treasure that almost ignores distance, is as clear as a face-to-face conversation, and can even carry a one-way teleportation array? If your mother knew that you have such good fortune now. He paused slightly, a deep-seated pain and reminiscence flashing in his eyes, then turning into a deeper gentleness as he looked at Nangong Chen. She would be extremely gratified. Nangong Chen's hand tightened almost imperceptibly over the teacup, his knuckles turning slightly white before he relaxed it again. He looked up at the drifting clouds in the sky outside the hall, his eyes as deep as night, and remained silent. His mother, Su Li, was always an unspoken, ever-present, silent wound between him and his father, and one of the deep-seated obsessions that drove him to keep moving forward and climbing to the top. A moment of silence fell over the hall, broken only by the rising wisps of incense smoke. Zhu Ying, standing to one side, kept her eyes downcast, her breathing slow and gentle. Though she didn't fully grasp the grand schemes of those families and merchant alliances, nor did she understand the mysteries of the tokens and magical artifacts, she could keenly sense the complex and profound emotions flowing between this father and son of such high status. Admiration, pride, hidden pain, and an unspoken concern and tacit understanding. Nangong Chen realized his mistake and subtly changed the subject, laughing. Your grandfather is probably in his secluded meditation room again, engrossed in some newly acquired ancient inscription or fragmented array diagram, so engrossed that he's lost track of time. You know his personality. He won't step out of his meditation room until he's thoroughly digested and mastered any new discovery. Let's wait patiently. It should be soon. Before the words were finished, buzz! Without warning, a deep tremor emanated from the central space of the hall. Immediately afterward, a pitch-black crack, like the opening of the heavens, silently tore open. There were no violent spatial turbulences, no astonishing oppressive aura. The edges of the crack were unusually stable, as if it had always been there. A vast, profound aura, carrying a faint scent of iron and the dust of time, emanated from the crack. The light in the hall seemed to dim for a moment, and the rising smoke from the incense burner seemed to freeze. In the next instant, an old man stepped out of the crack. His white hair danced like a raging dragon, moving without wind, each strand seemingly possessing the sharpness to cleave through time. His face was ancient, his wrinkles etched like chisels, recording endless vicissitudes and battles. He wasn't particularly tall, yet he resembled an ancient mountain, instantly becoming the absolute center of the entire hall upon his appearance. Most striking was the seemingly simple, unadorned black longsword at his waist. Even before it was drawn, it chilled the heart, as if countless souls fallen beneath its blade were silently howling. Chapter 591, The Saint King. Just as the three were lost in their own thoughts, Nangong Chen seemed to sense something, raised his eyebrows slightly, and looked in one direction. Suddenly the sky darkened, and the once bright, white sky seemed to be blocked out. Moonlight shone through the courtyard and shone directly on the bluestone slabs. Moonlight! It's high noon. Where's the moonlight coming from? Zhu Ying's pretty face froze, and she stared blankly at the shadow on the ground, feeling an intense chill, a sharp, icy coldness that sent a shiver down her spine. All was silent except for a long, proud wolf howl, which seemed to pierce through the soul and grow louder in the ears of the three. Zhu Ying's pupils contracted slightly, and her delicate hands involuntarily gripped the hem of her skirt. As the moonlight rose in the distance, a figure materialized from it, the first thing to be revealed being a pair of blue eyes. With each blink, the wolf-like pupils shone with an astonishing light. The newcomer was an old man dressed in gray, with a black sword hanging at his waist. He walked very lightly, as if stepping on empty air. With each step, a ripple of blue flames transformed from a wolf claw appeared. He looked at the three of them, a faint smile in his eyes, his wrinkles pressing together to reveal a gentle smile, like that of an ordinary kind elder. However, the cold sword intent emanating from the ink-black sword hanging at his waist, and the towering, moon-like eyes and blade-like fur of the Azure Wolf King that faintly appeared behind his shoulder, all indicated that this was no ordinary old man. Zhu Ying saw it clearly, and all her fear and helplessness vanished from her eyes as she breathed softly without making sound. The man before them was none other than the ancestor of the current crown prince, the father of the Heavenly Abyss King, and an extremely powerful being who shook the three states. The Supreme Saint King, Nangong, is this the majesty of a sage king? Zhu Ying was shocked, but her body reacted quickly. She bowed deeply, showing the utmost courtesy, and said, Zhu Ying, the holy maiden of the heavenly array and disciple of the crown prince, greets senior, grandfather, father. Nangong Chen and Nangong Zhan, who were beside him, suppressed their shock and spoke up in unison. Good. The old man waved his hand, his gaze sweeping over the three of them, taking in the expressions of his monstrous grandson and his good-for-nothing eldest son. He was very satisfied on the surface and secretly pleased in his heart. However, Nangong Zhan and his son were far from at peace. This was the first time they had ever seen the old man, who usually kept a low profile and never showed his true power, reveal such astonishing might. Even Nangong Chen, who had been sweeping all the way, was now feeling unprecedented pressure. He estimated that even if he used all his magic weapons and trump cards, he probably wouldn't be a match for his father in a single move. Even Wei Yin, the blood god cult leader who stood atop Chu City that day, did not bring him such a significant difference. I never imagined there could be such a vast difference between Saint Kings. That strange phenomenon just now was truly astonishing. He felt a slight unease, realizing the vast gap between himself and the Saint King, but he was not discouraged. Instead, he was filled with enthusiasm and began to look forward to the changes that would occur after he broke through to the Saint King level. Nangong secretly observed the changes in his expression and felt a slight admiration in his heart. He had revealed this strange phenomenon simply to stimulate his grandson and to make it easier for him to sort out the Tao theory and break through to the next realm. Otherwise, he wouldn't have the leisure to show off in front of three juniors. Chapter 592, Enemy of the Tao. Its core doctrine is that the system we are currently cultivating is the Dharma aspect cultivation system. When one reaches the level of a Saint King, the soul has already been separated from the physical body and resides in the Dharma aspect, which is very different from the ancient cultivation methods. It can be said that the path of cultivation is nothing more than the process of solidifying the Dharma form. This cultivation system is undoubtedly the optimal solution for the human race, evolved from cultivation methods over several eras, and is a masterpiece created by the collective efforts of our predecessors. At this point, Nangong Yu's expression revealed a hint of amazement. Nangong Zhan, standing to the side, nodded, looked at Nangong Chen, and explained. Indeed, the ancients cultivated only two paths. One was divine power, and the other was the soul. Later, two major schools emerged. One focused on divine power and neglected the soul, while the other focused on the soul and neglected divine power. These two factions have a long history of development, and they look down on each other. The practitioners of divine power believe that the physical body is the foundation of a person. Only with a strong physical body can one drive martial arts and seize the creation of heaven and earth. Those who cultivate the divine soul believe that only a strong divine soul can make one immortal, and the physical body is just a vessel for the divine soul. After all, if their physical body is gone, they can choose to possess another body. Because of their differing ideologies, the relationship between these two factions was extremely tense, resulting in several major battles with victories on both sides. However, in the end, the path of the divine soul gradually faded from view, while the path of divine power became the mainstream. Do you know why? Nangong Zhan paused for a moment and looked at the snow-clad youth. After a moment's thought, Nangong Chen spoke up. Logically speaking, when a cultivator of the divine soul realm fights a cultivator of divine power realm, the cultivator of the divine soul realm will definitely have the advantage. As long as there is a certain distance, the cultivator of the divine soul realm will have the initiative. As long as a cultivator of the divine soul path is not allowed to get close, they can easily take the life of a cultivator of the divine power path without leaving a trace, relying on the supernatural martial arts techniques of the divine soul path. Even if they are attacked at close range, their powerful divine soul can be separated from their physical body and quickly soar into the heavens. It can be said that they are capable of both survival and offense. However, their only weakness is that their physical body is not strong enough. But for a cultivator of divine soul, this is actually an advantage. They can abandon their physical body without any attachment and possess the body of a cultivator of divine power who has a stronger physical body. No wonder those two factions are so locked in a bitter struggle. They're practically natural enemies. The more Nangong Chen thought about it, the clearer the logic became. He took a slight breath. Then, as if remembering something, he suddenly realized, if the path of the divine soul can decline even with such a great advantage, there must be a deeper reason behind it. First of all, those who cultivate the path of the soul face three major difficulties. First, their physical constitution is not suitable. Second, the cultivation techniques for the soul are extremely difficult to obtain. And third, the cultivation is extremely difficult. This has led to the fact that the number of people who cultivate the path of the soul is naturally lower than that of cultivators of divine power. As time goes on, the number of cultivators of divine power will inevitably be 100-fold or 1,000-fold greater. The cultivation environment for the divine soul path was compressed, and coupled with frequent defeats in the later stages, naturally no one cultivated the divine soul path anymore. If anyone did, it was extremely rare. At the same time, he also understood why the ancient cultivators mentioned by Nangong, you had a natural advantage in overcoming the tribulation of inner demons. How could those who cultivate the soul not have an advantage? That's right. Nangong Chen nodded with satisfaction and added, the original term evil cultivator actually referred to cultivators who followed the path of the soul. It's no wonder that people hate and beat people who use such ruthless methods. Nangong Chen murmured something and shook his head. Chapter 593, the Dharma image hangs in the sky. The difference between the two. Nangong Chen glanced at him and continued in a deep voice. Although the path of the divine soul has withdrawn from the historical stage, its shadow still lingers over the path of divine power, and the path of divine power is paying more and more attention to the problem of weak divine souls. The difficulty in solving this problem lies in the fact that the cultivation methods of the soul and the power are mutually fundamental, meaning that they cannot be cultivated at the same time. One can only choose one. Therefore, if we want to solve this problem, we need to use another medium to connect the two. Thus, after generations of deduction, the Dharma image cultivation system came into being. The God King realm, also known as the God King Dharma aspect realm, is a newly added realm. In ancient times, there was no such realm. Those cultivators discovered that the Dharma forms drawn from all the myriad races of the heavens, from every tree and blade of grass to all things, not only allow for the simultaneous cultivation of two paths, but also possess the wondrous power to bless oneself. Evolving over time, it has gradually become the cultivation of three paths simultaneously: divine power, divine soul, and divine form. The advantage of this cultivation method is that it has no weaknesses. It is neither physically weak nor easily attacked by the divine soul. It can also enhance combat power under the temporary blessing of the divine form. But to say there are no flaws is naturally impossible. The only flaws are the slow cultivation speed and the fragility of the Dharma body. If the Dharma body is shattered, the cultivator will suffer a severe backlash. Nangong Zhan's tone was quite solemn. This was not only to explain the cultivation system to him, but also to tell him that he must not damage his Dharma body. Nangong Chen nodded slightly, his eyes flashing, and his mind suddenly cleared. So, this is what it means to cultivate three paths simultaneously? Truly extraordinary. Nangong Yu smoothly picked up the conversation, smiling as he said, if you break through to the Saint King level, you can greatly reduce the risk of damage to your Dharma body. Do you know why? Nangong Chen shook his head. How would he know? Because the image of the Sage King is in heaven. Nangong Yu pointed to the sky, his eyes flashing with the shadow of a gray wolf. Nangong Chen and Nangong Zhan looked up and saw the invisible sky on the dome suddenly shatter and rise all the way up to several layers of sky, where they finally saw the Dharma image of the Azure Wolf King with hair like blades and eyes like frost. In an instant, their eyes stung, as if they were being swept away by an invisible blade intent, and they felt a terrifying pressure rushing towards them. In just a few breaths, Nangong Zhan could no longer hold on, lowered his eyes, and felt a slight tremor in his heart. His Emperor's Tour of Heaven has reached the realm of Saint King, but he cannot place his Dharma image on the dome. Could this be the drawback? Nangong Zhan felt a bitter taste in his mouth. If he were to encounter a true Saint King, he would probably only be able to put on a show of strength. Nangong Chen activated his double pupils, his eyes gleaming with a dark light as he carefully observed the situation. Even though his eyes ached, he showed no intention of lowering himself. This is a golden opportunity to observe the Sage King. In other words, once you reach the Saint King level, your Dharma image can only be injured by those of higher realms than yourself. As for those of lower realms, you can't even touch them. Nangong Chen spoke with focused concentration. Clever. Nangong Yu praised his grandson without any hesitation, revealing a set of white teeth. After receiving confirmation, Nangong Chen finally understood, and his eyes darkened slightly. The realm of the Saint King is an insurmountable chasm for lower-level cultivators. Even the gap between a saint and him is like an insurmountable chasm. At the same time, he also realized how lucky he had been to be able to injure Wei Yin with the human emperor's sword in the past. It can be said that at that time, he directly exhausted all the immortal medicines he had obtained in the immortal treasury, as well as a large number of sacred medicines, which can be described as a huge cost for crossing the border. This injury occurred when Wei Yin was not on guard against him. If Wei Yin had regarded him as a saint king of the same realm, he would not have suffered such a loss. What a stroke of luck! Unfortunately, the spiritual herbs within the heavenly essence steel can no longer withstand the power of that sword strike I unleashed back then. Nangong Chen sighed inwardly, feeling a little regretful, as it meant he had lost one more trump card. Chapter 594 Supernatural Powers. However, it was just a pity. Now he has many ways to kill, so he doesn't lack this powerful weapon. He doesn't usually need to use it. He lacked protective treasures, but fortunately, with the sect leader's robe, he still had 3 life-saving trump cards. Not long after, the old man's deep voice rang out again, and Nangong Chen immediately focused his attention. Besides being able to manifest a Dao domain and having a lifespan of 100,000 years, the Saint King also possesses a unique advantage, namely, supernatural powers. Supernatural powers? Nangong Chen, standing to the side, showed a hint of curiosity. Why couldn't he sense any supernatural power when he used Emperor Sky Patrol? The young man in white also looked at the old man with some confusion. Nangong Yu smiled slightly, as if he had expected it. After all, there were very few records of Saint Kings in the Xian-Tian domain. Even he only discovered this wonder after his breakthrough. He presented his research, which he had compiled over the years, in a methodical manner. That's right, it's a supernatural power. Once you break through to the Saint King realm, you could develop a supernatural power based on your own physique. After years of research, I have discovered that those with a 7th grade physique can develop a single supernatural power. Those with an 8th grade physique can develop 2 supernatural powers, and those with a 9th grade physique can give birth to an astonishing triple supernatural power. In addition, all Saint Kings can cultivate an extra great divine power unique to their own physique, which is a divine power acquired later in life. Nangong Chen was somewhat dazed, as he had never learned so much about the Saint King before. Nangong Chen further asked, if someone with a physique below the 7th grade breaks through to the Saint King level, wouldn't they lose their supernatural abilities? Nangong Yu shook his head, his expression complex, and then said something startling. In fact, everyone is born with 9 supernatural powers. However, due to acquired factors, coupled with the hidden essence inherent in the human body, supernatural powers will naturally dissipate over time. Only in the end, those with slightly better talent in 7th, 8th, and 9th grade physiques will retain their supernatural powers after breaking through to the Saint King realm. So, does that mean that if a 6th grade talent cultivates faster than a 9th grade talent, they can also possess supernatural abilities? Nangong Chen pondered for a moment, then stroked his chin and asked. Nangong Chen nodded slightly and said, theoretically, it is feasible, but the difference in cultivation speed between each grade of physique is huge, making it almost impossible for such a thing to happen. Therefore, it can be said with certainty that only those with a 7th grade physique or above can possess supernatural abilities. In fact, some geniuses with 9th grade aptitude can unintentionally unleash 1 or 2 supernatural abilities before they reach the Saint King level, due to their rapid cultivation speed and much less ignorance than normal cultivators. However, they cannot be stable and their abilities are not fully realized. Upon hearing this, Nangong Chen immediately realized, isn't this him? No wonder. I have previously had strong thoughts in different battle environments that enabled me to unleash the wonders of my double pupils. But after the final battle, that feeling vanished completely, without a trace, and no matter how I tried to summon it, I couldn't unleash it. Nangong Chen took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, just like his gaze transforming into a divine spear and shooting out, as well as the netherworld fire hidden in his eyes, and even the shackles that bound the little demon queen that day. All of these were unintentionally unleashed when his thoughts were strong at the time. But when he reviewed the events later, he tried to summon those mystical powers, but he could no longer do so. At the time, he thought it was just because he had a special constitution. Yes, that's exactly your situation. You've developed a strong resonance with your constitution, which is also a subtle and wondrous ability to unleash supernatural powers. Upon hearing this, Nangong Yu's eyes gleamed. Meanwhile, Nangong Chen scratched his head and said, I've never felt this way before. I thought that everyone's physique was only used to determine the cultivation method and the martial arts technique to be practiced. I didn't know that physique could have an effect similar to martial arts techniques. That means you're not a genius enough. Nangong Yu shook his head, showing no respect whatsoever to his son. Nangong Zhan's face flushed red instantly, but he quickly laughed it off, saying, so what? As long as my son can feel it, that's enough. I'm the one who gave birth to him. Nangong Yu ignored him and continued to look at Nangong Chen. After a moment's thought, she spoke. As for why you can't feel or use it later, it's because your body is instinctively protecting itself. Even for us Saint Kings, supernatural powers are extremely taxing, let alone for someone like you who hasn't reached that level yet. Nangong Chen suddenly realized that he had triggered his body's protective system, which prevented it from being used multiple times. So that's what they call supernatural powers. Nangong Chen felt a surge of excitement, his eyes sparkling with anticipation. Nangong Yu took in his expression, chuckled, and continued. But after breaking through to the Saint King realm, supernatural powers don't just appear all at once. Instead, they will gradually unlock within you as your realm advances. It's like my physique is that of the 8th grade Azure Wolf King, with 2 divine abilities. When I first entered the Saint King realm, I awakened the first divine ability, called New Moon Soul Chaser. In the middle stage of the Saint King realm, I awakened the second divine ability, 10,000 Wolves Wild Domain. Thus, my path of supernatural powers has come to an end, except for the great supernatural powers that I have not yet cultivated. Nangong Chen was secretly shocked. He had never heard of these 2 supernatural abilities before, and just from their names, he knew they were ridiculously powerful. Nangong Chen nodded slightly, memorizing the names of the 2 divine abilities in his mind, and then said, "How does the Sage King classify realms?" Upon hearing this, King Tianyuan, who was standing nearby, immediately perked up and quickly leaned forward to listen. Nangong Yu seemed to have expected this, and said in a calm and unhurried tone, "The realms are divided according to the number of Dao domains. The first to the 25th level is the early stage, the 26th to the 50th level is the middle stage, the 51st to the 89th level is the late stage, and the 90th level and above is the peak." Furthermore, in ancient methods, peak Saint Kings are generally referred to as Great Saint Kings. This is just a general statement. After the Saint King, we mostly refer to the number of Dao domains directly. So that's how it is. "Old man, what level of Dao domain are you now?" Nangong Chen suddenly realized, and then his expression changed, filled with curiosity. The old man didn't keep them in suspense. He laughed heartily and said with a touch of pride, "Now, I am the Saint King of the 62 Dao domains." We're already in the later stages? Weren't you a Saint King who only broke through in the last 2 years? Cultivating the Dao domain is so easy. Nangong Chen looked shocked. Nangong Chen was also somewhat incredulous. He hadn't expected his grandfather to have cultivated to the 62nd level of the Dao domain. Nangong Yu shook his head, his expression complicated, and said, "Normally speaking, if I wanted to cultivate from the first level of Dao domain to the 62nd level of Dao domain, it would take me more than tens of thousands of years. But the rare and precious materials that Rukin left me back then greatly enhanced my Dao domain, saving me tens of thousands of years of arduous cultivation. If I wanted to cultivate from the 62nd level of the Dao domain to the 63rd level now, I estimate it would take 400 or 500 years." These words struck Nangong Chen and his son Nangong Chen like a thunderbolt, leaving them stunned on the spot. After a long while, Nangong Chen asked in a trembling voice, "What kind of rare and precious material is that, with such miraculous effects? How come I didn't know she left it for you?" Nangong Yu's expression darkened slightly as he said, "That was a jar covered in Dao patterns. Before she left, she specifically instructed me to refine it immediately after breaking through to the Saint King realm. Knowing that this item must be extremely valuable, I immediately asked her why she didn't leave it for her own husband and Chunner, who was still in swaddling clothes." Rukin shook her head. I had never seen her look so solemn. She said that her family was about to face a calamity and they would have to rely on her father to get through it. After saying that, Nangong Yu said no more and seemed not to pursue the matter further. Nangong Chen and the other person were processing this information in silence. For a moment, the atmosphere became somewhat tense. "Did she really say that?" Nangong Chen murmured. "Nonsense, would I lie to you? If I don't explain clearly, you old bastard will definitely think I stole your spiritual resources." Nangong Yu snorted and said with a dark face. Nangong Chen shook his head. That wasn't what he meant. He knew Rukin well. She never lied. If she said there would be a calamity in her family in the future, then it must be true. What kind of calamity could have led Rukin to entrust her affairs to her father so solemnly? Meanwhile, Nangong Chen, standing to the side, felt a chill run down his spine as he pondered the sentence carefully. Calamity? Back when Tianyuan Mansion was still part of the Great Zhou Dynasty, he was just a playboy. What calamity could he possibly have? Was it because he changed all the circumstances that led to that calamity? Moreover, how would Mother know that Grandpa would break through to the Saint King realm in the future? She was well aware of the rules of heaven and earth at that time, which forbade the saint to attain enlightenment. Moreover, why did he have to tell his grandfather alone, instead of his father, about such a big matter? Nangong Chen and Nangong Chen were clearly thinking the same thing. They remained silent with grim faces, trying to figure out each other's motives for saying those words. Actually, there's nothing to worry about. It's just a calamity. Now that I've done as Rookin asked, there won't be any problems. She certainly won't harm us. Seeing the solemn expressions on the father and son's faces, Nangong felt that they were making a mountain out of a molehill and shook his head. I will not go into seclusion to break through to the next level for now. A few breaths later, Nangong Chen spoke. No. As soon as he finished speaking, two voices rang out simultaneously. Nangong Chen stared at the two faces so close to his own, his tension almost leaping from his eyes. He couldn't help but chuckle and said, I will go to the upper realm to go into seclusion. There are only a few months left until the Immortal Inquiry Conference. Breaking through is a major event that takes 1,000 years to complete, so there is no need to rush. During this time, I will focus on improving my cultivation and martial art skills. Nangong Chen secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Thankfully, it wasn't what he had thought. He then smiled. That's fine. You really can't make any breakthroughs in a few months. There's no rush. You can relax and take a walk around the mountains and rivers of this divine dynasty. There's no need to push yourself so hard when it comes to cultivation. Nangong nodded slightly and echoed. What your father said is true. In the path of cultivation, one needs a balance between work and rest to sustain it for a long time. Nangong Chen responded, but he seemed absent-minded, his mind wandering, and he kept raising and putting down his teacup. The calamity arose because of him, and this period is crucial. How could he go to cultivate alone and let the divine dynasty face it for him? He decided that no matter what happened next, he would stand with the divine dynasty through thick and thin. Nangong Chen silently made up his mind, downed the tea in his hand in one gulp, and said, Father, how is great supernatural power cultivated? Great supernatural power. After pondering for a while, Nangong said, I've been exploring great supernatural powers recently and have some ideas. First, you need to unlock all the innate supernatural powers in your body before you can cultivate great supernatural powers. There are two ways to cultivate great supernatural powers. One is to learn from the methods of predecessors, such as when I went to find the ancient secret method for cultivating the great supernatural power of the Azure Wolf King. The second is to create great supernatural powers on your own, which requires a higher level of cultivation, and at least I feel that I cannot do it now. The former is relatively simpler, but it's difficult to find a method that suits one's own path. Moreover, the higher one's physique, the harder it is to find such a method, and the rarer it is. My physique is all right. At least I have already found some clues about great supernatural powers in the 3 states. The latter is more difficult, and generally requires a higher level of cultivation and a deeper understanding to create one's own. In terms of the effects of the two, it is not necessarily true that self-creation is better than the former. After all, some people lack understanding and skill, so their creations of great supernatural powers are inferior to others. It really depends on the person who created the great supernatural power. By the way, didn't you go to the immortal treasury and obtain the inheritance of the double-pupiled woman? There must be a cultivation method for great supernatural powers in it. The old man suddenly remembered something and glanced at it slightly. Upon hearing this, Nangong Chen immediately remembered, and his eyes flickered. He did look at the memories the woman with double pupils gave him, but they were too profound. He still couldn't understand much of them and could only grasp the surface. He estimated that he would need to reach the level of a sage king to barely understand a little of it. Of course, this wasn't a matter of comprehension. It was simply that his own level of understanding was too low, and his perspective and comprehension hadn't kept up, so naturally he couldn't understand what it was saying. Since there are great supernatural powers inside, he doesn't need to worry anymore. As for whether to cultivate them or not, he'll wait until he awakens those powers later. Yes, there is. Nangong Chen nodded slightly. What great luck. Nangong glanced at him with a hint of envy, then asked, Have you finished refining the heavenly map you obtained from the Heavenly Array Holy Land? Or its effects? I've heard rumors that Tianta seems to have some favorable conditions for a breakthrough, but I don't know if it's true or not. Chapter 595, 3 Generations Under One Roof. After saying that, the two looked at the boy with a hint of anticipation. To everyone's surprise, the young man simply shook his head and said, It's not finished refining yet. I don't know how much longer it will take. Nangong was not discouraged and nodded. That's true. This is a treasure of their holy land, so it's only natural that it takes a long time to refine. They skipped that topic and instead started talking about the double entendre. It must be said that this battle was truly one of the most devastating in the past tens of millions of years. It is no exaggeration to say that the central divine continent suffered a severe blow. Nangong Chen remained calm, his fingers lightly tapping the armrest as he spoke softly. Nangong nodded slightly, his gaze darkening. and took a sip of tea. They probably won't recover for several thousand years. Clearly, the Divine Dynasty also received news of the post-war casualty figures. As a participant in this battle, Nangong Chen naturally knew that the casualties were heavy. He simply turned away, his eyes deep and unfathomable, lost in thought. After a long while, that calm and youthful voice finally rang out from the hall. If it weren't for the intervention of our Divine Dynasty, the central and northern divine continents wouldn't be in this state today. It's fortunate that each family has managed to retain one or two cultivators, and that the younger generation still has a chance to rise to prominence. Absolutely. Absolutely. Nangong Yu sighed. Although they may have had their own selfish motives, their efforts to save the day were undeniable facts that the world must acknowledge. The three of them only sighed briefly before moving on to the next topic. Nangong, slightly agitated, said, "For our dynasty, this battle has yielded tremendous gains. Not only have we resolved the external threat in the far west, but we have also gained control over many forces in those two states. From now on, the world will belong to our dynasty." In just 1 year, the Nangong family has already reached the pinnacle of the three states. Even if they were to go to the underworld in the future, they would have the face to meet their ancestors. Who would have thought? Who would have thought that my family was once just a noble family in a declining dynasty? The old man was taken aback at first, but then he burst into laughter, his face glowing and his eyes brimming with youthful energy. "This is all thanks to Chun'er, Nangong Zhan. The best thing you ever did in your life was to give birth to Chun'er, giving my family a son of exceptional talent." Nangong Chen rarely saw his father and grandfather so excited. He shook his head and remained silent. His usually indifferent face now showed a gentle smile. The young man, full of vigor and ambition, stood up, his white robes fluttering in the wind. Gazing at the myriad lights of homes below the distant mountains, he declared, "The future divine dynasty will not be confined to the Xiantian domain." Upon hearing this, Nangong Yu and his son Nangong Zhan exchanged a glance, both seeing the relief in each other's eyes. The boy in their eyes was still young and naive, but he made them feel incredibly at ease. If you ever see Rukin or her people in the future, you can stand confidently in front of them without feeling inferior or timid. "It is Chun'er who has given you this confidence." Nangong Yu spoke softly, so softly that only the person next to him could hear it. At some point, the king of Tianyuan, the man revered as the supreme ruler of the land, whose nobility was beyond measure, now gazed at that tall, upright figure, tears welling in his eyes, just like any other middle-aged father. His voice trembled as he spoke. "Chun'er has his own life from birth. Whether it's good or bad, he is still my son. I only hope that he can grow up carefree and fulfill his responsibilities as a father." He shook his head, his eyes revealing an unprecedented determination. "Why should I use my son to bolster my confidence in my own affairs?" Chapter 596 Revenge. Nangong Yu spoke softly, so softly that only the person next to him could hear it. At some point, the king of Tianyuan, the man revered as the supreme ruler of the land, whose nobility was beyond measure, now gazed at that tall, upright figure, tears welling in his eyes, just like any other middle-aged father. His voice trembled as he spoke. "Chun'er has his own life from birth. Whether it's good or bad, he is still my son. I only hope that he can grow up carefree and fulfill his responsibilities as a father." He shook his head, his eyes revealing an unprecedented determination. "Why should I use my son to bolster my confidence in my own affairs?" Lingshu Island. The island has been covered in white lately. It's early spring, but there's no snow. Upon closer inspection, I realized that every house was covered in white cloth, and the sound of mourning echoed through the streets. It must be the death of some very important person. At the village entrance, 4 or 5 children tried to tear down the white silk ribbon to play with, climbing around the threshold one after another. But they heard a shout coming from afar, which startled them, and they scattered. Several strong men rushed over, their faces filled with fear. They quickly moved the white silk back to its original position, smoothing out the wrinkles again and again. Only then did one of them say, with lingering fear, "Those idiots." Luckily, the city guards didn't see them, or the whole village would have been beheaded. Perhaps it was because someone spoke first that they calmed down a bit, and then they lowered their voices to start discussing. "Yes, I wonder which important person has died, because even people from remote places like us have to go through the funeral procession. It's not just one person who died. I heard that many people died, and many people from the next village were taken away to be buried with them. This is really a disaster. Thank goodness they didn't arrest us. Those big shots all consider themselves extraordinary and look down on our lives. We just happened to escape this disaster, so we can be considered lucky." A dark-skinned man chuckled self-deprecatingly, his gaze complex as he looked towards the bustling cities at the foot of the distant mountains, where he could almost see the various immortals in their gleaming robes. He sighed softly, not daring to look any longer, and followed the others back to the village. Inside the Jun family palace, people were coming and going, all dressed in mourning clothes, with tears streaming down their faces, heads bowed and silent, creating a very oppressive atmosphere. There was no other reason than that their most talented prodigy was dead. He had died in the 3 states that they considered a wasteland. Not only that, but all the accompanying saints and younger generation were also killed, leaving only the Grand Elder who managed to escape by risking his life. According to the Elder, an extraordinary family appeared in those 3 states. On that day, the entire opposing family strength was mobilized, and 2 Saint Kings and that incredible monster were dispatched to wipe them out. The clan was shocked that day, and even the patriarch was alarmed. If the Grand Elder hadn't repeatedly emphasized it, they wouldn't have believed that their successor in this generation, the clan leader's son, and even the person on whom the great figures of the upper realm placed high hopes, Jun Wushuang, had died just like that. That the powerful body, a body with a bloodline concentration approaching that of the upper realm. It's been their hope for turning things around all these years. My child, the loudest wailing in the hall came from the middle-aged woman kneeling on the ground, still holding a portrait of Jun Wushuang in her arms. Her name was Lu Ro, and she was Jun Wushuang's birth mother. She was originally a woman from small family, with no power or influence. However, after giving birth to Jun Wushuang, her status in the clan rose rapidly, and she took revenge on those who had looked down on her before, and the clan turned a blind eye to it. It can be said that Jun Wushuang's death had the greatest direct impact on her. Many people are watching coldly. Chapter 597, The Wrath of a Hidden Family. The hall fell silent instantly. Even Lu Ro stopped crying and looked up in slight fear. Before anyone knew it, 3 figures had already appeared on the throne on the high platform. The young man on the far left was dressed in a blue feather robe. He had slightly wide eyebrows and eyes, and his gaze was cold. His features were very similar to Jun Wushuang's. His life force was incredibly amazing. The Dao domain on the dome manifested and turned into a blue sky. He was actually a Saint King. His lips trembled slightly, his face quivered, and his eyes were slightly red, as if he was suppressing his anger. He coldly looked down at the crowd below, clearly indicating that the silence he had just spoken was indeed his order. On the far right throne stood a familiar old man in black robes, his face scarred and his expression slightly dazed. He rested his newly reattached right hand on the armrest, remaining silent, without even manifesting his Dao domain. This person was none other than Jun Huaiyuan. The domineering and spirited demeanor he had when he set off for the 3 states had completely vanished. As for the old man in the center, he wore a light blue robe with deep-set eyes. He leaned on his throne with his eyes closed and remained silent. His aura was the most astonishing, and the Dao domain manifested on the dome was terrifyingly high, reaching a height of 49 heavens. Upon recognizing the 3 individuals, the crowd below the stage immediately knelt down, respectfully chanting in unison. We respectfully welcome the ancestor, clan chief, and grand elder. Jun Xianying waved his hand, his wrinkles twitching slightly, and calmly asked, "Is there any news about the Z family?" Upon hearing this, an elder immediately stood up, bowed to the old man in the light blue robe, and then hesitated slightly before saying, reporting to the ancestor, "The message has been delivered, but the Z family has remained silent for some time. I wonder why. I'm afraid they suspect that what the first elder said was false." The old man chuckled. The Z family has long been removed from the Xiantian ranking and has been poisoned by the demons of the 3 states. This was inevitable. We just need to confirm the soul lamp. It won't be long before they come knocking on our door. Do they really think they can get away with it just because some of my family died? The young man in feathered robes gritted his teeth and said coldly, "The Immortal Ascension tournament is imminent. If they don't make a move soon, we won't have to wait any longer. Our Jun family alone is enough to annihilate those demons from the 3 states and avenge my son, as well as those deceased elders and prodigies. My husband is absolutely right. We must avenge Shuanger. Shuanger was such an outstanding and sensible child. She was even valued by the lords of the upper realm. And yet she died like this, at the hands of a group of nameless people. If we don't avenge this, we will have failed him." Lu Ro also knelt on the ground, sobbing. The sadness and hatred on her face could not be faked, and she glanced at Jun Huaiyuan. Jun Wushuang was, after all, her own flesh and blood. It would be a lie to say she didn't feel sorry for her, but she hated Jun Huaiyuan even more. Why could he come back? But her Shuanger couldn't. The Grand Elder must have abandoned Wushuang and escaped alone. Although he returned in such a sorry state, Who knows how much power he had been holding back? Lu Ro was indignant, but because of the other party status, she dared not say anything more. As a sage king, Junhuan on the stage possessed an extremely sensitive divine sense, and naturally he sensed the other party's gaze. He opened his mouth, seemingly wanting to defend himself, but in the end, he said nothing, swallowing everything down, and bitterness gradually surfaced in his eyes. Is he going to say that if Jun Wushuang hadn't been so arrogant and conceited, and hadn't gone forward to fight him one-on-one, he wouldn't have died? You have to understand, the opponent has two Saint Kings. He himself is at the third level of Dao domain. Fighting saints is fine, but if it comes to fighting Saint Kings of the same level, he is really no match for them. The fact that he can hold out for so long is already a testament to his desperate efforts. But who would have thought that even with the help of 10 saints, Jun Wushuang would perish in less than a few incense sticks' time? Jun Wushuang can't be blamed, nor can he be blamed. Should he blame that Saint Kid for being too powerful? But no matter how powerful he is, he's just a saint. How can he stir up any trouble when surrounded by 10 saints? It must be because these people in the clan have been too comfortable at home and haven't fought for too long that they suffered such a crushing defeat. Jun Huayuan had no words to express his bitterness and could only shake his head in silence. Jun Xianying's expression was extremely grave. Only then did he open his unfathomable, turbulent eyes and coldly say, "We must avenge this. For so many years, my Jun family has dominated the Xiantian domain. When have we ever suffered such injustice? What's more, they're just ants from 3 states. They killed my clan's heir, annihilated my clan, and cut off the future pillar of my Jun family. This is a blood feud, and my Jun family swears to fight them to the death." This ancestor of the Jun family had lived for countless years. He had witnessed the family's decline after migrating from the upper realm, the glory of 10 Saint Kings within the clan, and the excitement of witnessing the extraordinary phenomena that filled the sky when Jun Wushuang was born. He had thought that at the end of his life, he would see Jun Wushuang lead them back to the upper realm so that he could enjoy his old age in peace. But he never expected that everything would change after just one trip to the 3 states. How could he not be furious? But as angry as he was, after calming down, he carefully recalled the specific details of that day, as described by Jun Huayuan. The one who killed his own family successor was actually a young man, none other than Nangong Chen, the current #1 genius on the Xiantian ranking. Not only did he kill his family successor in the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, but he was even able to kill 10 saints in the clan. It is said that he has the legendary Double Pupils. He didn't believe that such combat power could be achieved solely through this supernatural ability. Where on earth did this monstrous talent come from? Jun Xianying was completely baffled, and even the origins of the 2 Saint Kings who had emerged from behind him were unclear to him. Aren't the 3 continents covered by the rules of heaven and earth? Why would a Saint King appear among them? And even a crimson dragon? Could it be from the upper realm? That's impossible. The 9 realms are guarded every day. Besides, if it were just a fleeting moment, how could I not sense it? Therefore, there must be only one possibility left. These people, by sheer chance, obtained a magical artifact that shielded them from heavenly secrets, allowing them to break through, and recently at that. In the past, they would have surely revealed themselves within the 3 states, and their spies there should have gotten wind of it. Chapter 598, It's All Fate. Jun Xianying's mind was now filled with only this one possibility. His brows relaxed slightly, and he parted his lips slightly, saying, "Junyi, have the spies from the 3 prefectures sent back any news?" The Jun he spoke of was none other than the young man in feathered robes beside him, the current patriarch of the Jun family, and Jun Wushuang's biological father. Jun remained silent, instead looking down at an elder of the clan below. The elder understood immediately, quickly bowed, and left the hall. Only then did Jun speak. After calculating the time, today is the day those spies will return. Please wait a moment, ancestor. Jun Xianying nodded slightly. Then, as if remembering something, said, "Has Yinner come out of seclusion? If so, have him come to see me." As soon as he finished speaking, his subordinates responded immediately and sent several cultivators to fetch the person. Junyin is the successor of the previous generation. He has terrifying talent and possesses the divine wind overlord body. He reached the peak of sainthood in just over 1,000 years and is now trying to become a Saint King. He has been in seclusion for 2,000 years. Before long, several figures hurried over. They were spies who had gone to the 3 prefectures. They carefully handed over several envelopes. Jun Xianying simply took it, scanned it with his spiritual sense, and absorbed all the contents into his mind. A few breaths later, his expression was a mixture of shock and shock, or perhaps a hint of relief, extremely complex. He then handed it to Jun who had been anxiously waiting for a long time. June, he was even faster. With just one glance, he was struck dumb, frozen in place, and exclaimed in shock. The heavenly abyss divine dynasty, which slaughtered our people, actually has 5 saint kings. The one who killed my son is the number 1 immortal in this generation, and also the number 1 on the myriad realms ranking. A saint who is only 19 years old. These words silenced the hall even more. You could hear a pin drop. The expressions on the faces of the people below the stage changed dramatically. Their previous soaring anger turned into blank stares. Their June family came from the upper realm. Although many of their ancestors have passed away over the years, in terms of the number of saint kings, there's still enough to rival the entire 3 continents. But to their surprise, one of the 3 states they looked down upon actually had a power with 5 saint kings, something they had never heard of before. The key point is that this very family is the target of their revenge. What shocked them even more was the second half of the patriarch's words. The enemy who murdered their descendant possessed terrifying talent. When did such a terrifying force emerge in the 3 states? Immediately, an elder slumped to the ground, his eyes filled with despair, and Lu Ro gasped for breath, unable to believe it. Fortunately, they haven't set off yet. With such a disparity in strength, what is there for them to seek revenge for? Jun Huayuan took in their reactions, his expression seemingly calm, but he was deeply shocked. He had felt that the other party was not simple that day, but he was not simple at all. They were terrifying. No wonder they were able to send 2 saint kings to protect their successor. Jun Xianying was the first to recover, staring intently at Jun Huayuan, and said, "Are you sure it was the other party who deliberately murdered Shuang and the others, and not that you want to provoke them?" Jun Huayuan's expression changed drastically. He hadn't expected things to develop this way. When the other party asked about the contradiction earlier, he had just made up a reason and shifted the blame onto them. After all, he couldn't very well say that he had usurped the other party's forces and killed their people. Faced with the pressure from the patriarch, this scarred old man, with an extremely ferocious expression, could only grit his teeth and stammer. It was because the disciples below were too lenient that they killed the other side's people. You still won't tell the truth. Jun Xianying was furious. He made no attempt to conceal his aura. The void surged with anger, the Xuanwu churned, and the entire clan hall shook. The Jun family members turned pale. Jun Huayuan was startled. He had never seen his ancestor with such an expression before. He gritted his teeth and then told him everything. After the time it takes for an incense stick to burn. As he finished speaking, Jun Xianying slumped weakly onto the throne, murmuring, "The calamity of the clan cannot be avoided." Now that he understands what happened, he realizes that there is absolutely no possibility of reconciliation in this matter. He couldn't blame Jun Huayuan. After all, over the years, whenever they went north to the 3 states, they all knew what the clan had done and who had been killed, and the atmosphere between superiors and subordinates was one of tacit approval and habitual acceptance. But who could have imagined such a twist, kicking a hornet's nest? It's all fate, Jun Xianying murmured, a sorrow he had never seen before appearing in his eyes. He had also read the history of the rise of the Tianyuan divine dynasty, which was utterly absurd, as if it had appeared out of thin air. In particular, he did not believe that the young man named Nangong Chen was not blessed with great fortune, destiny, or the influence of a powerful figure. What's more, this happened so coincidentally. Not long ago, 3 of the saintly ancestors of the Jun family passed away. Now, there are only the 3 of them left in the clan. Ancestor, shall we still seek revenge? Our clan has only 3 saint kings. A cautious voice came from beside him. Jun Xianying turned around and saw Jun Yi. The young man's face no longer showed the anger and impetuosity of before. Instead, it showed a timely calmness. Jun Xianying smiled. After all, whether it was the death of his son or the death of his father, the other party knew better than anyone else. The old man did not answer him, but shook his head. After a few breaths, a young man in silver robes suddenly appeared below the stage. He had a sharp face, sharp eyes, and a long sword hanging at his waist. He descended slowly, stepping on a gust of wind. "Your son greets all of you esteemed officials." Zhenyan bowed and said softly. Seeing that he had passed the second test, Jun Xianying should have been overjoyed, but she couldn't bring herself to smile. She could only manage a forced smile and say, "Good." Zhenyan had already sensed the strange atmosphere in the hall, but he didn't say anything and stood there obediently, feeling quite curious. Not long after, another loud voice rang out. "The reclusive Z family has arrived." Early in the morning, Nangong Chen walked out of the Hall of Governance. He used a spell to dispel the smell of alcohol from his body until his snow-white clothes were surrounded by immortal energy. Then he smiled helplessly and disappeared from the spot. A few breaths later, a figure suddenly appeared in the spacious and quiet crown prince's palace. It was none other than Nangong Chen. He looked around, but couldn't find any familiar faces. He muttered to himself, Mengling must have gone to break through to quasi-saint. I wonder how long it will take. Hopefully, she'll emerge from seclusion before the Immortal Ascension Tournament in a little over a month. Chapter 599, Yunhuang God. After saying that, Nangong Chen didn't rest and started his cultivation for the day. After all, he only said that he wouldn't go into seclusion, but he didn't say that he wouldn't cultivate at all. Just be careful to control your cultivation time, so as not to delay things. Since he couldn't improve his cultivation level, Nangong Chen began to review the martial arts techniques he had learned, such as the Heavenly Emperor Fist, the Divine Elephant Suppressing Prison Force, and the Human Emperor's Heart Sutra, etc. Improving one's martial arts proficiency can also enhance combat power. Soon, half a day passed. Nangong Chen stopped his swordsmanship, sheathed the Emperor's sword in his hand, and cast a cleansing clothes technique, instantly restoring his white clothes, which had been soaked with sweat, to their original state. His eyes brightened slightly, clearly indicating that he had made another discovery. Logically speaking, if it were an ordinary saint's martial arts technique, even if one practiced it for half a day, or even for a month, there would be very little improvement. Not only were all the martial arts he practiced divine-grade techniques, which were extremely difficult, but he also completed a complete cycle of all the martial arts he learned in just half a day. He distributed each martial art technique among himself, and even though it only took him 1 or 2 hours, he still managed to make progress. This is all thanks to his incredibly high level of comprehension, which enabled him to complete such a set of cultivation techniques. Thankfully, I managed to obtain that primordial Dao fruit. Nangong Chen sighed and began to summarize his martial arts training over the past half-day. Once the Divine Elephant Suppressing Prison Technique, Heavenly Emperor Fist, Thunder Emperor Treasure Technique, Movement Secret, and Shilin Treasure Technique are mastered, it becomes extremely difficult to increase proficiency as rapidly as before. After all, there is a huge gap between the great completion and the perfection. The perfection, as the name suggests, means that one has cultivated the technique to the theoretical limit envisioned by its creator. Therefore, it is normal for the cultivation speed to be slow now. He could accept that the slow pace of cultivation meant the profoundness of the technique and its extremely high potential. If one could master a technique in a few short moments, then his doubts would not be about whether his comprehension was too high, but whether it was a bad technique. As for the later stages of enlightenment and attaining the Tao, those are beyond his reach at this stage. It's important to understand that transformation to perfection means that you have transcended the framework of the cultivation method itself, integrated it with your own Tao, and endowed it with unique characteristics, making it more suitable for you, rather than you adapting to the cultivation method. Entering the Tao is even more defying the heavens, meaning you have completely mastered this technique and evolved it into a unique Tao law. At that stage, the technique no longer exists because it has become a part of you. These descriptions of transformation and enlightenment are probably just meant to fool people. There's no way the difference between them could be so huge. Besides, I've never heard of anyone actually reaching the enlightenment level. Nangong Chen shook his head slightly, finding it unbelievable. In fact, during the process of cultivating martial arts, he could also sense that martial arts should be linked to cultivation level. The higher the cultivation level, the deeper the understanding of the Tao, which can feed back into the cultivation of martial arts. The lower the cultivation level, the more blurred the understanding of the Tao, and the more difficult it is to advance the martial arts. Therefore, many powerful individuals possess profound cultivation, and their martial arts skills are certainly not lacking. Feeling the power emanating from his body and the incredible speed from his legs, Nangong Chen had a premonition that in the next few realms, with the aid of martial arts alone, his physical strength, power, and speed would far surpass those of others in the same realm. This was enough to make him invincible. Not to mention, he also possessed several highly accomplished killing techniques. The only drawback is that it consumes too much spiritual energy. After all, it is a divine-level technique. Although it is effective for those at the same level, it consumes too much spiritual energy. Often, a single use will deplete all the spiritual energy in an ordinary cultivator's body, let alone the ability to freely use different martial arts techniques during battle. Fortunately, the great Tao immortal scripture he cultivated, although it consumed a huge amount of resources, truly improved him in all aspects. For example, the spiritual energy stored in his spiritual sea was 10 times that of others at the same level. At the same time, the speed at which spiritual energy is restored is 10 times that of other cultivators at the same level. This ability allows one to easily defeat many opponents, and even fight opponents of higher levels within the same realm. Such a perfect cultivation method, if it has any drawbacks, is that it requires high aptitude for cultivation and extremely high resources. For example, with the same resources, Others can cultivate to the next major realm, while you can only advance to the next minor realm, or sometimes you can't even advance to the next minor realm. But these shortcomings are not, in the end, shortcomings of the technique itself, but rather shortcomings of the person. Among the cultivation techniques and martial arts skills that Nangong Chen has practiced so far, the Great Tao Immortal Scripture ranks first, followed by the Human Emperor Heart Scripture and the Fighting Secret, and then the other cultivation techniques. The Human Emperor's Heart Sutra is a soul cultivation technique, which is inherently extremely difficult. Furthermore, it is a divine-level technique, making it even more difficult. It is already beyond comprehension. The reason why the Double Secret is so difficult is that it is a technique that analyzes all martial arts skills. It requires extremely high comprehension to continuously dissect other techniques and learn and integrate them. It can be said that the Double Secret is like a martial arts encyclopedia. If you cultivate it to perfection, it will give you the ability to create your own techniques. Currently, due to the short cultivation time, the Human Emperor's Heart Sutra has only reached the minor completion stage, while the Fighting Secret is only at the entry level. The Double Secret hasn't yet shown any extraordinary power, but the Human Emperor's Heart Sutra has brought him considerable gains today. Nangong Chen sat cross-legged on the ground and circulated the Human Emperor Heart Sutra for a while. His soul was golden and protected by an extremely rich imperial aura, and the strength of his soul was constantly increasing. Nangong Chen's eyes gleamed with delight as he murmured, "This divine elixir is truly extraordinary." This is the change brought about by his cultivation of the Human Emperor's Heart Sutra to a minor level today. It is a wonderful technique called Nourish the Emperor's Spirit. As the name suggests, his soul is protected by the imperial aura and is extremely difficult to damage. In fact, as the number of supporters increases, his soul will continue to strengthen. Of course, if the number of supporters continues to decrease, the strength of the soul will also weaken, which is its drawback. With this wondrous technique, I will no longer need to fear treasures or martial arts techniques that specialize in cultivating the soul. I just wonder if other wondrous techniques will be revealed as my skills improve. Nangong Chen muttered to himself, quite expectant. The soul is one of the weaknesses of the current cultivation system. Although it is said that the three paths are cultivated at the same time, in the end, the physical body still accounts for the majority of the cultivation. After all, spiritual cultivation takes a long time and is very difficult. They can increase the strength of their spiritual soul simply by improving their cultivation level. So why do they need to cultivate further? However, once someone of the same realm cultivates one or two killing techniques of the divine soul, these cultivators will find it difficult to resist, and even the most outstanding talents will die at the hands of an unknown person. After all, everyone's spiritual strength is equal. This is why some truly extraordinary individuals often use their spare time to cultivate their spiritual soul, so that their spiritual soul is not too mediocre. However, since the cultivation of the soul path is not a specialized skill, the improvement of their soul strength is limited. Unlike Nangong Chen, who is heaven-defying and whose soul strength will automatically increase even without cultivation, as long as someone supports him, his soul strength will be comparable to some cultivators who specialize in the soul path. Chapter 600: The Young Sword Saint, the Catastrophe of Clan Extinction. After reviewing his martial arts techniques, Nangong Chen's eyes flickered slightly. He stretched out his palm and pointed his fingers like a sword, and a wisp of gray-white sword energy leaped from his fingertips. The sword energy alternated between light and darkness, with yin and yang intertwined, symbolizing the two rules of vitality and twilight. A single wisp of sword energy that occasionally leaked out was enough to make the void tremble and the world lose its color. This is the 9th grade supreme sword intent, the reincarnation sword intent. Now, with the improvement of his own cultivation, this sword intent looks more and more full and sharp. Only now did Nangong Chen begin to adapt to the intensity of this sword intent, a hint of surprise in his eyes. This sword intent is incredibly powerful. If it lands on an enemy, it can force them to age and weaken for several breaths, causing things like slowed movement and a decline in cultivation level. Don't underestimate these few breaths. In a battle between equals, they can change a lot. The effect is even more ruthless when dealing with enemies of lower cultivation levels, as they can forcibly reduce the opponent's cultivation level by an entire major realm, for example, causing them to drop directly from quasi-saint to God King. It can be said that it almost eliminates the opportunity for the opponent to fight against someone of a higher level. With this item, the probability of being defeated unexpectedly will be greatly reduced. After fully understanding its mysteries, Nangong Chen's eyes brightened slightly, and he chuckled. It is no exaggeration to say that the Samsara sword intent is the most severe father to the Chosen One. Fortunately, He listened to Su Li's advice to cultivate the sword path. Otherwise, such heaven-defying sword intent would have been out of his reach. Of course, this also included his desire to cultivate a weapon, but he just happened to choose the way of the sword. In fact, the way of the sword is very compatible with him, and he reached the perfect level in just half a year. Speaking of which, if we follow the way cultivators in the Xian Tian domain call me, I could now be called a sword saint. Nangong Chen seemed to have thought of something and murmured to himself. There's no other reason than that. Whether it's the way of the sword, the way of the knife, or the way of the spear, there are different names for different skill levels, unlike martial arts, which are just names. For example, those who have mastered the art of swordsmanship can be called grandmasters, and can establish their own schools and leave their mark on the history of swordsmanship. Those who reach this level are often one in a million geniuses in the art of swordsmanship. There are over 10 million sword cultivators in the world today, but only 100 are grandmasters. As for perfecting sword intent, one needs to comprehend a sword intent on the basis of great mastery, and then refine the sword path for several years to gain this understanding. This understanding is then integrated into one's own sword path, perfecting it, and forming a sword path school that can be passed down. Those who reach this level are called sword saints, the patriarchs of a sect or holy land, and can be worshipped by sword cultivators all over the world. The world is no more than a handful of them. It can be said that a grandmaster of swordsmanship may not necessarily have sword intent, but a sword saint definitely has sword intent, and this is the difference between the two. The two subsequent realms are only known through legend, transformation, and entry into the Tao. The former is known as the sword god, and the latter as the sword immortal. At least not in the Xian Tian domain, and Nangong Chen had never heard of any deeds related to this sword god or sword immortal. The methods for advancement in these two disciplines described in ancient texts, as well as the signs they reveal, are few and far between. They may be recorded in the core of some sacred sword-wielding sites, but are difficult for ordinary people to access. But the only thing Nangong Chen was certain of was that the world claimed that the heavenly sword saint Master Zhao Lei had reached the level of a sword god was definitely an exaggeration and a fabrication. After all, he had seen the other party before, and could sense that the other party was still in the realm of perfect sword intent. However, since everyone says so, and Zhao Lei hasn't come out to clarify, there must be a compelling reason behind it. Nangong Chen was too lazy to delve into it. When Gu Mingling mentioned it to him last time, he simply echoed her sentiments. I wonder if there are such figures in the upper realm. Nangong Chen muttered to himself, shook his head, and didn't think much of it. In the end, it was still too far away from him. Since you're not in a hurry to cultivate, you can always go to the heavenly origin spirit steel. It's been quite a while since you last went. He hadn't forgotten that the old ginseng had told him how to use the world tree seedling. Nangong Chen's eyes were deep as he pondered. Then he took out the heavenly origin spirit tablet and made a thought. The next moment, the world spun around until he felt a surge of spiritual energy rushing towards him, and only then did Nangong Chen open his eyes. Just like before, the interior of the heavenly origin spirit tablet still resembled a vast universe, beautiful and magnificent. More than 90 precious herbs floated in the void, scattered in various corners. At the very center was still that emerald green sapling, full of vitality, radiating wisps of divine light. From a distance, it seemed that the great Tao was evolving within it. Beneath their feet, a galaxy of immortal essence gathered, with crystalline threads connecting the precious herbs and the world tree sapling from bottom to top, continuously channeling spiritual energy into them. Nangong Chen glanced at his feet and realized that not a single drop of the immortal spirit liquid, which had been exchanged for more than 10,000 immortal crystals, had been lost, which secretly surprised him. This means that there must be a large array inside the heavenly origin spirit tablet to maintain the balance of spiritual energy. Moreover, this array will not absorb the immortal spiritual liquid to maintain itself. It can operate on its own as long as the quantity is placed there. You've only been asleep for a short while, and you're already here again. Not long after, a short old man emerged from a corner of the void, yawning. Nangong Chen nodded slightly, a smile playing on his lips. I took Elder Shun's words to heart, so I came as soon as I had some time. Elder Shun waved his hand, seemingly unmoved by this. But upon closer inspection of the snow-clad youth, he sensed something amiss, rubbed his eyes, and looked again before finally exclaiming with slight shock. How long has it been? You've already broken through from God King to Great Sage. Nangong Chen turned around, staring intently at the world tree sapling above his head, and shook his head, saying, I was just lucky to get a bit of an opportunity. The old man's lips twitched. You're telling me this is just luck? You've improved your cultivation by 2 major levels in just a few months. However, he was a man of the world, and, after calming himself down, he looked at the young man, standing with his hands behind his back, his eyes filled with increasing satisfaction. Perhaps this young man can truly restore the heavenly origin spirit tablet to its former glory someday. Nangong Chen ignored what he was thinking, looked at him, and said quietly, "Senior, do you still remember to tell this junior about the effects of the world tree sapling?" The old man suddenly realized that this was what he had come for. No wonder, no wonder. Faced with the boy's gaze, Elder Shun first scratched the back of his head, then looked closely at Nangong Chen before shaking his head and saying, "Your current cultivation level is too low. You can't use that world tree sapling yet. Last time, my memory had only partially returned, and I misremembered. I thought you had already reached the level of a celestial god." Nangong Chen was somewhat disappointed, but he still caught the key words in the other person's words, God. The reclusive Z family has arrived. As the voice faded, the expressions of everyone in the Jun family hall varied. No one had expected that the Z family would actually come, just as the ancestor had predicted. If we add the Jun family to the list, wouldn't this grudge be avenged? Jun Huayuan, standing on the high platform, was overjoyed. He secretly rejoiced that the boy had also dealt a heavy blow to the Jun family, treating everyone equally. Otherwise, if he couldn't avenge himself, he wouldn't be able to explain himself to his clan, let alone to that important figure in the upper realm. You should know that before setting off for the 3 states, Junyu had repeatedly instructed him to keep an eye on Jun Wushuang's safety. Now that Jun Wushuang has lost her life there, Junyu will definitely hold him accountable. He couldn't bear most of Junyu's wrath. The only thing he could do was kill that kid to atone for his sins and gain a chance at survival. Let them in. Jun Xianying had expected this, and said in a deep voice. Meanwhile, Jun Yi, the current patriarch of the Jun family, remained silent, his eyes darting around, his fingers gripping the armrest tightly, somewhat regretting what he had just said. Before long, 3 figures appeared at the palace gate and slowly walked into the palace. The members of the Jun family present all showed respect and made way for the middle of the path. Junyan also respectfully stepped aside, lowering his head and not daring to look directly at them. After sensing the 3 powerful auras, he was slightly shaken. The 3 Saint Kings of the Z family have all come. Judging from the expressions of his clansmen just now, and the sight of all that white mourning robes, Junyan seemed to realize something. He looked around, as if trying to find a certain figure. Unfortunately, he didn't see her for a long time, and his eyes became somewhat dazed. An incredibly bold idea surged into his mind. No way. Jun Xianying, I never imagined that our reunion would be like this. Inside the hall, the 3 stopped in their tracks. The purple-haired elder at the head of the group sneered, his eyes filled with a chilling light. He was dressed in a purple-gold robe, his shoulders seemed to be burning with bright flames, and his every move exuded a heart-palpitating heat. This person was none other than Z Jili, the patriarch of the Z family, who possessed 45 Dao domains. However, due to his physical constitution, he only had 1 supernatural power. Beside him was a familiar middle-aged face, Z Zhongtian, the current head of the Z family, and also the most powerful person in the Z family, a powerful expert with 40 Dao domains and 2 divine abilities. Jun Xianying remained silent, his gaze fixed on the only remaining young woman, a sense of shock creeping into his heart. She actually succeeded? Even faster than Yenner. How many years have passed? Only 2,000 years, right? The person Jun Xianying pointed to was none other than the only young woman among the 3 members of the Z family, named Ziyang, who was the previous generation successor of the Z family and a prodigy of the same era as Junyan. Junyan looked up and saw clearly that the 3rd Saint King was not Zishan, but Zhang. Looking at that familiar, aloof face, Junyan's expression stiffened. On the other side, Jun Xianying withdrew her gaze, her expression revealing a sorrow she couldn't quite feign, and said, "Yes, I never imagined we'd meet again in this way. My condolences." Z Jili turned his head away, took a deep breath, and gritted his teeth, saying, "Your clan is doing well, with even a Saint King running back, while all the people from my clan who went to the 3 states have perished. What are you mourning for? If anyone should mourn, it should be that little beast and his ilk. What grudge, what hatred could have led to the extinction of an entire generation of my Z family? How cruel they are! If I do not avenge this, I, Z Jili, swear I will not be a man." The old man in purple had bloodshot eyes, and the anger in his eyes could not be concealed. The bright flames on his body seemed to want to scorch the sky. Upon hearing this, the members of the Jun family were all moved, and their eyes became somewhat moist. Yes, when have these 2 reclusive families ever suffered such a loss? Their hopes for the future have all been dashed by the 3 states. Zi Zhongtian cupped his hands and said directly, his tone slightly cold, The reason we have come here is to form an alliance with the Jun family and take revenge on the Tianyuan divine dynasty together. He looked much more haggard than before, indicating that the pain of losing his son had also taken a heavy toll on him. Upon hearing the words, Heavenly Abyss, Divine Dynasty, Jun Xianying knew that the Z family had come prepared. He stood up, cupped his hands, and replied, An alliance is the right thing to do. Neither of us can be missing. That little beast has terrifying talent. We must nip it in the bud as soon as possible. Otherwise, if he grows up, our two races will surely be wiped out. This is a calamity for both families. I urge you, nobles, to refrain from holding back and treat this as a crisis of annihilation. My Jun family has also done everything in its power. His face showed an unprecedented seriousness as he gritted his teeth and said each word with deliberation. He saw it more clearly than anyone else. Since they had become enemies with such an existence, if they did not do everything in their power to eliminate it, their entire clan would become the enemy's destiny to become stronger. Moreover, there are powerful figures behind this, and this is their only chance. Everyone present was startled by the old man's words. They never imagined that this matter would be so serious as to be linked to the extermination of their entire clan. Having lived in peace and comfort in the lower realm for so long, they had never seen anything like this before. For a moment, they were all filled with fear and dared not utter a word. Zhenyan finally understood what had happened. His face turned pale, and he could hardly believe it. Jun Wushuang, he's dead. The Z family members remained silent. They all knew that Jun Xianying was one of the earliest people to come down from the upper realm and had experienced far more than they had. Therefore, there must be a reason behind what he said. The three exchanged glances, none of them seeming to have realized the gravity of the situation. In the end, Z Gulai listened to him and whispered, Old friend, how about my Z family send out 80% of our saint level or higher combat power? The enemy is merely a force from 3 states, far less powerful than ours. Jun Xianying shook his head and said, You should know that a year ago, the other party did not have a single saint king. They all broke through in just 1 year. Even that prodigy appeared out of nowhere. They should not be underestimated. Z Gulai frowned. If all the combat power above the saint level were mobilized, the Z family would be left unguarded. If a few saints came, it would be as if they were in an empty land. Moreover, who knows if the other party's words were deliberately meant to induce him to say such things in order to plot against the Z family. But who would have thought that the next moment, Jun Xianying made a solemn vow, My Jun family has also mobilized all its forces above the saint level, with only revenge on our minds. If anyone harbors any disloyalty, I, the ancestor, will sacrifice myself to uphold the Tao, my cultivation will collapse, and my soul will be scattered. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone present changed their expressions and looked at the old man with shock. The Z family members' faces stiffened. They knew that this great Tao oath was not the heavenly Tao oath. Every cultivator would be bound by this oath. If the other party goes against what you say, they will truly perish. Chapter 6:01 Family Schemes. Has it really come to such a critical juncture? Z Geely murmured, the flames in his eyes flickering, mirroring his thoughts at that moment. Jun Xianying nodded slightly, sat back down, his eyes deep, and said in a deep voice, Even a lion uses its full strength to hunt a rabbit. Even if the opponent only has 5 Saint Kings, if we decide to take action, we must use thunderous methods to kill them. We cannot leave a single one alive. Especially that monstrous talent who was once the number 1 in the immortal realm, now ranked number 1 on the Xiantian ranking, Nangong Chen. When the old man spoke the name Nangong Chen again, he gritted his teeth with intense hatred, all sorts of resentment welling up in his heart. Z Geely was also swayed by his emotions, a murderous glint flashing across his face. That's right, this boy is someone my clan must kill. No matter if he has 3 heads and 6 arms, he will die this time. Tell me, what do you want our Z family to do? He looked at Jun Xianying and handed over the decision-making power for this operation to him. Jun Xianying already had a plan in mind, and was just waiting for him to say this. After pondering for a few moments, she replied, That day, Jun Huayuan of my clan saw 2 Saint Kings of the other side. One of them wore a mask and was the Azura. The other Saint King was a half-dragon transformed into a dragon, which was said to be the boy's mount. Both the man and the beast were at the early stage of Saint King, and were not to be feared. Z Geely nodded. He was aware of this information as well, but there was one thing that puzzled him. Where did a Saint King Crimson Dragon come from in the 3 provinces? Perhaps it was because they consumed the essence of heaven and earth, and the Heavenly Abyss Divine Dynasty possessed a magical treasure that shielded them from the secrets of heaven, that they were able to break through by sheer luck. It's not surprising. Jun Xianying shook his head and continued. As for the other 3 who were exposed on paper, They were all recorded in the Battle of Chu City. It is said that they joined forces to kill a blood god cult member who was in the mid-stage of Saint King in a short period of time. Among them, Nangong Chen, known as the Supreme Saint King, even beheaded that mid-stage Saint King with a single strike. Before he could finish speaking, Geely interrupted him. Impossible. Those 5 Saint Kings have only been at the breakthrough stage for a year and a half. At most, they are at the early stage of Saint King. Even if these 4 people and 1 beast went up together, they could not possibly kill a mid-stage Saint King in a short time. Upon hearing this, the other Saint Kings present also nodded in agreement. They all understood the characteristics of the Saint King realm. The strength difference between each stage was enormous, and it was notoriously difficult to defeat those at higher realms, no matter how many people there were. It's no exaggeration to say that if this mid-stage Saint King wanted to, the 5 early-stage Saint Kings wouldn't even be able to touch his Dharma form. Even the weakest mid-stage Saint King would only feel somewhat strained if he were to fight 5 early-stage Saints alone. The idea that it would threaten his life is simply a pipe dream. These natives of the 3 states probably can't even distinguish the Saint King realm. They mistakenly believe that the slain Saint King, who was at the early stage, was at the mid-stage, and they're just trying to use this to enhance the reputation of the heavenly Abyss Divine Dynasty. Zhongtian frowned slightly and spoke. Jun Xianying took in their expressions, sighed silently, and shook his head, saying, "That's hard to say. The 3 states only recorded when the Saint King of the Tianyuan Divine Dynasty was born, but never recorded his cultivation level or how long it took him to break through. You only believe the information that those spies gathered in the 3 states, but you haven't considered that it is very likely that this is false information released by the Tianyuan Divine Dynasty to mislead us. Currently, the opponent only has 2 Saint Kings who have fought against our clan's Saint Kings and can be confirmed to be at the early stage of Saint King. As for the rest, we have no idea when they broke through, when they acquired the magic treasure that shields the secrets of heaven, or their true realm." Upon hearing the old man's words, the several sage kings in the hall began to ponder, their brows furrowing slightly, clearly indicating that there was some truth to what he said. Not long after, a small compass appeared in Zhongtian's hand, and he said softly, "This is the yin-yang compass. It has a mysterious power called looking at the sky. It can use a trace of cause and effect to observe the aura from a distance and calculate the other party's information. However, its power will be reduced with distance." Upon hearing this, the elder and the female cultivator from the Z family remained expressionless, clearly having expected it. These words were naturally meant for the ears of the other party's family. "Oh, such a treasure exists. Your noble family's wealth and resources are truly profound." Jun Xianying's eyes lit up immediately, and he said with a hint of joy, "It's nothing more than a third-rate, broken immortal artifact." Zhongtian waved his hand casually, then looked at the old man in a black robe with a scar on his face, and said, "Fellow Taoist Huang, please place your palm on the compass." Well, Jun Huayuan was not surprised. In terms of who he was the only one in this place who could have a significant connection with the people of that divine dynasty, so it was only natural to call him. He readily agreed and instantly appeared in front of the compass, raising his sleeves and circulating his spiritual energy. He wanted this revenge to succeed more than anyone else, and he would not be careless about such a crucial matter. Zhongtian's lips twitched, and he uttered a spell. Immediately, the compass spun rapidly, and Taoist energy flowed through it. As if sensing something, Zhongtian closed his eyes, and a series of illusory images flashed through his mind. He witnessed the fierce battle between the 2 sides of Tianbao Pavilion that day, saw Jun Wushuang die, and saw Jun Huayuan's face contorted with rage. Similarly, he also saw the indifferent Azura masked man in the void, and the half-dragon transformed into a red dragon that made him tremble. He had never seen such an amazing creature before, but the scene shifted quickly, and he only glanced at it before losing interest and continuing to search for the person with the greatest karmic connection between this place and the heavenly Abyss Divine Dynasty. Clearly, he wanted to see that so-called divine prodigy. He shifted his gaze downwards, a look of delight on his face, and finally saw the figure in white in front of Jun Wushuang's corpse. He slowly looked up, and what came into view was a pair of sharp and astonishing silver boots, followed by a robe that exuded an ethereal aura. Although Zhongtian was slightly amazed, his eyes still held an undisguised murderous intent. As he was about to see that face, Zhongtian didn't dare to breathe. However, he was suddenly stunned. The rapidly spinning compass also stopped for a moment, and a look of panic suddenly appeared on his face. All that could be seen on the face beneath the white robes was nothingness. Nothing could be seen at all, let alone any so-called cause and effect. Zhongtian, with his extensive experience, did not hesitate for long and quickly switched to the next target, aiming at the masked man in the void. In an instant, countless crystalline threads appeared from the back of the other person's head. Zhi Zhongtian immediately aimed the most intense one, stretched out his hand and grabbed it, and the scene changed once again. A few breaths later, under the tense gazes of Jun Xianying and the others outside, Zhi Zhongtian opened his eyes, panting heavily, his spiritual energy in a chaotic mess. Zhi Jili also reached out slightly and patted his back to help him smooth out the spiritual energy in his body. Zhi Zhongtian's expression softened, and he said with a hint of regret, "There was an unexpected incident. We only saw the figures of the other two Saint Kings. Kong Daoyuan and Yumian are both at the early stage of Saint King, with only the 5th level of Dao Domain, and each possesses a supernatural ability." Upon hearing this, the several Saint Kings present breathed a sigh of relief, while the 3 members of the Jun family were even more astonished. It's astonishing that they could know so much information from such a great distance. Aside from Nangong's cultivation level being unknown, the information about the powerful figures of the Tianyuan divine dynasty was almost entirely revealed. Among the 5 Saint Kings, for we're at the early stage of Saint King. I knew it. The holy king of this divine dynasty must have broken through in the last year or two. Now it seems that's true. There's no need to test the remaining one. He's probably also an early-stage holy king. Zhi Gulai's eyes flashed with murderous intent, and his tone was exceptionally confident. Even if this person is exceptionally talented and manages to break through to the mid-stage in these few years, he's still only a mid-stage Saint King. What's there to fear? As for his future realms, that's even more impossible. Junyi and the others exchanged glances and nodded slightly, agreeing with the other party's statement. Jun Xianying was filled with worries, fearing unforeseen changes. But at this juncture, this was already the best outcome. He knew most of the information about the other side's powerful figures, while the other side remained unaware of them. Hopefully nothing unexpected will happen. Jun Xianying muttered something to himself before turning his gaze toward them. Zhi Zhongtian remained calm and echoed, "Ancestor is absolutely right. Our 2 families together have a total of 6 Saint Kings, while the divine dynasty only has 5. Moreover, the enemy is in the open, while we are in the dark, giving us the advantage. We, 3 mid-stage Saint Kings and 3 early-stage Saint Kings, are no match for a force of 4 early-stage Saint Kings. Forgive my bluntness, but we have absolutely no chance of losing this battle. The only thing to consider now is the combat strength of the sages. After all, that prodigy of the divine dynasty is now fully grown, and ordinary sages are no match for him." Jun Yi, who had been silent all along, revealed a sinister smile. "If a great battle begins, why can't the 6 of us spare some manpower and kill that little beast first? Even in the midst of battle, we have plenty of opportunities to make our move, but we fear that he might not dare to come out, or he might take advantage of the chaos to escape. It's all right. As long as we kill this powerful figure from the divine dynasty, we'll have plenty of ways to force him to reveal his whereabouts." The young woman in the purple dress spoke, her tone indifferent. "That's true." Juni nodded slightly, then continued, "My Jun family still has 15 sages left, including 4 great sages. This time, according to the patriarch's wishes, everyone will be mobilized." Zhi Zhongtian naturally understood the other party's implied meaning. After pondering for a few moments, he said, "The Zhi family has 15 remaining sages, including 3 great sages. Since that's the case, all of them will be mobilized." "What spirit?" Junyi smiled. It was at this moment that he was able to smile. However, his tone quickly turned cold. "I don't believe that kid is so monstrous that he can deal with 7 great saints." Seeing that everything was settled, the 2 patriarchs nodded and then discussed the timing of the trip. Before long, the 3 members of the Zhi family took their leave, satisfied. Both sides decided to depart in 3 days. At that time, the Jun family would take out a broken immortal artifact shuttle, which would cross the heavenly sea in just half a day and arrive at the so-called Heavenly Abyss Divine Dynasty in no time. This would be faster than a Saint King traveling at full speed. Moreover, without a flying magic weapon, if a group of powerful individuals were to simply travel this route, regardless of speed, the spiritual energy consumed would be too much for them to bear, especially for those who are about to engage in a major battle. Watching the 3 figures depart, Jun Xianying said softly, "Actually, a more prudent approach would be to wait until that great man descends to the lower realm during the Immortal Ascension Conference. His strength far surpasses that of a Saint King. If he were to destroy a small force, there would be no surprises. But if it really comes to that, that official is always concerned about his reputation. If I make him lose face in front of his other officials because of this, he will definitely come to me for an explanation in the future. My Jun family cannot afford the grudge of such a person." "What the ancestor said is absolutely right," Junyi replied, a cold glint in his eyes. With revenge imminent, he was somewhat distracted. Meanwhile, the three members of the Z family, who were flying in the air, began to communicate using their spiritual senses. Ancestor, why didn't you tell them that Zixue is still alive? Ziyang asked with some curiosity. Zixue has most likely defected to the enemy. Such a family scandal should not be publicized too much. Zigolai's eyes were utterly cold. Ziyang was stunned. She hadn't expected it to be for this reason. Zi Zhongtian, standing to the side, nodded, his tone icy. He's even still within the divine dynasty, working for them. As expected, bastards can never be tamed. No wonder they're disliked. Ziyang remained silent for a few moments, a murderous glint appearing in his eyes, and said, "Should we kill her?" Zigolai shook his head and said coldly, "Of course she cannot be killed. She is a fragment of Princess Zi Yuan's soul. Capture her and imprison her. She will have a good life in the future." Chapter 602 The Wonders of Immortal Elixir. This chapter will be completed later. What the ancestor said is absolutely right. Jinyi replied, a cold glint in his eyes. With revenge imminent, he was somewhat distracted. Jun Xianying glanced at him, assuming he was still grieving over Jun Wushuang's death, and remained silent. Meanwhile, Jun Huayan cautiously said, "Ancestor, Nangong Chen's breakthrough was so fast that he was able to reach the saint level at the age of 19. He must have some great opportunity. If we capture him and study his secrets, it might be able to help our clan move up another level." Although he was still saddened, he was no longer controlled by his emotions. He had long since broken free from that oppression, and his gaze was extremely calm. Upon hearing this, Jun nodded slightly and said in a deep voice, "We can't let Wu Shuang and the others die in vain." "Good." Jun Xianying agreed, his gaze cold, and continued, "This is also one of the reasons for this operation. This boy is a treasure from head to toe. If we refine him, our clan will not only be able to rise to a higher level, but it is also very possible that we will return to the upper realm in the future. Therefore, this operation must be one step ahead of the Z family to capture him." In the old man's deep-set eyes, a startling greed finally surfaced. Meanwhile, the three members of the Z family, who were flying home, looked at the scenery in front of them with calm expressions. They seemed to be silent, but in fact, they were communicating with each other in secret using their divine sense. "Ancestor, why didn't you tell them that Zixue is still alive?" Ziyang asked with some curiosity. "Zixue has most likely defected to the enemy. Such a family scandal should not be publicized too much." Zigolai's eyes were utterly cold. Ziyang was stunned. She hadn't expected it to be for this reason. Zi Zhongtian, standing to the side, nodded, his tone icy. "According to those spies, the person is still within the divine dynasty, working for them. As expected, bastards can never be tamed. No wonder they're disliked." Ziyang remained silent for a few moments, a murderous glint appearing in his eyes, and said, "Should we kill her?" Zigolai shook his head and said coldly, "Of course she cannot be killed. She is a fragment of Princess Zi Yuan's soul. Capture her and imprison her. She will have a good life in the future. As for her relatives and friends in the three states after this battle, they need not live either. Leave no one alive, so that she can truly experience the price of betraying my Z family." "You really think you'll be safe and sound just because you've left my Z family? How naive." Inside the Tianyuan spirit steel. Therefore, after becoming a Saint King, there are 4 major realms until one achieves the status of a true immortal: Venerable, Tao Lord, Heavenly God, and Supreme. After listening to Elder Shun's explanation, Nangong Chen spoke thoughtfully. He had some understanding of Chu Wanli's breakthrough while he was in the Immortal Treasury, and today he officially learned the names of these realms. That's right, after becoming a Supreme Being, one can become a true immortal. Elder Shen nodded, paused for a moment, then shook his head and said, "As for those born after the true immortals, I'm not qualified to speak on your behalf, for fear of saying the wrong thing and displeasing those important figures. If you happen to meet a great person with an even higher destiny in the future, you can ask them to explain it to you." Chapter 603 The Sun. Elder Shun's words were extremely tactful, and Nangong Chen did not inquire further, simply waving his hand as if he did not care. The old man stroked his beard and continued to laugh. "If you reach the 100th level of the Tao domain you cultivate, you will become a venerable, and at the 1000th level, you will become a Tao Lord. Boy, you still have a long way to go. 100-fold venerable, 1000-fold Tao Lord?" Nangong Chen understood, muttered to himself, and realized he knew which way to go from here. This also allowed him to learn just how powerful the venerable master that Prince Aolong had mentioned that day truly was. However, he was wearing the sect leader's robe and had the primordial pearl to shield him from cause and effect, so he wasn't particularly panicked. His only concern was whether the proud dragon prince would drag the divine dynasty into his anger. May I ask, Senior, if cultivators from the upper realms come to the Xiantian domain, are they allowed to act with impunity? Nangong Chen realized that the old ginseng in front of him knew far more than he had imagined. So he casually asked to see if he could get any information. This is a bit difficult for me. I know very little about the lower realm, since I've always been in the upper realm. Upon hearing this, the old man with white eyebrows that hung upside down scratched his head, pondered for a moment. Then his eyes lit up, and he said, I remember now. I once followed a user of the spirit tablet to the mortal realm. He was a celestial being. According to him, one must be extremely careful in the mortal realm and not reveal even a trace of one's aura. Otherwise, the entire world will collapse, and he cannot bear the consequences. Although I don't know why he can't bear it. Since he said so, there must be a reason. I see. Nangong Chen understood, and a smile appeared on his lips. He hadn't expected to actually get this information. Even the gods couldn't bear such consequences. How could a mere venerable one possibly shoulder them? Seeing the slight joy on his face, Elderkin asked, puzzled, What? Do you have enemies in the upper realm? However, he quickly shook his head and reassured them. You don't need to be too afraid. Unless it's a special occasion, people from the upper realm are forbidden from smuggling themselves into the lower realm. If caught, they will be condemned by all the families. Nangong Chen nodded inwardly, making these things a memory. Then he asked with some doubt, Senior, what is the connection between the gods you mentioned and the world tree sapling? Only by refining the Tao seed can one break through from Tao, Lord to Heavenly God. The old man spoke with a slight headache, then quickly waved his hand. Kid, don't ask me anymore. My head is about to explode. Don't you know that an old man can't remember so many things after just waking up? Seeing his expression, Nangong Chen smiled meaningfully, stopped speaking, and didn't make things difficult for him further, saying, Your answer is correct, Senior. Here's a reward of a few immortal crystals for you. Nangong Chen flicked out several immortal crystals, which landed steadily in the old man's arms. The old man was overjoyed and quickly praised. Good lad, good lad. It was worth all the time I told you. He then stuffed the immortal crystals into his mouth in one gulp, his face suddenly turning red. After gulping them down a few times, he swallowed them, and his expression returned to normal. He looked at Nangong Chen, his eyes filled with lust, drool dripping from his mouth, and asked, Is there any more? This was the first time Nangong Chen had ever seen a living being so ferociously swallow a celestial crystal. He was stunned for a few moments before shaking his head and saying, That depends on how you perform next time, Senior. The old man's eyes widened, his beard stood on end, and he was about to say something, but he quickly shrugged and said, Well, it's good that you met me. I can still tell the difference between a full meal and a half. Nangong Chen ignored him, already standing with his hands behind his back, looking at the starry river formed by the immortal spirit liquid beneath his feet, a strange light in his eyes. This immortal elixir can actually resonate with the immortal apertures within the body. He narrowed his eyes slightly, stretched out his hand, and immediately a few drops of immortal liquid fell into his palm. Nangong Chen directly activated the Great Zhou Immortal Scripture. The elixir vanished from the palm of my hand at an incredible speed, disappearing into my body. Nangong Chen closed his eyes and felt a warm current flowing through his meridians, making him feel extremely comfortable. He did not stop, and this time placed a ball of immortal liquid on his head. As the Great Zhou Immortal Scripture circulated, these immortal liquids rushed into Nangong Chen's immortal aperture, and one of the immortal apertures in his body was slowly opening. Boom! The warm current reappeared, and Nangong Chen's spiritual sea expanded slightly, giving birth to a celestial aperture. 154 immortal apertures. Nangong Chen opened his eyes, his heart trembling slightly, before he carefully sensed the change that had just occurred. How much immortal essence did it take to open one immortal aperture? Only 200 drops. You should know that if he had used immortal crystals to cultivate directly before, it would have taken him nearly 700 crystals to break through one immortal aperture. But now, with the use of this immortal elixir, the resources consumed are reduced by more than 3 times, which means he can open more immortal apertures with the same number of immortal crystals. This is a perfect cultivation treasure for the Great Zhou Immortal Scripture, which consumes a great deal of energy. Elder Shun had been observing Nangong Chen. He saw that when Nangong Chen circulated his cultivation technique, his spiritual sea was like a vast ocean, and the speed at which he absorbed spiritual energy was terrifying. He had never seen any saint with such a large spiritual sea and such a fast rate of spiritual energy absorption. However, why hasn't his cultivation level changed at all? His growth rate, is nowhere near his absorption rate. Elder Shin scratched his head, somewhat puzzled, as this was the first time he had ever seen such a situation. Not long after, the boy tossed him a storage ring, along with a statement that brooked no refusal. Convert all of these into immortal elixir. Without much thought, the old man opened it immediately. His expression suddenly froze, and a surge of powerful spiritual energy burst forth from it, almost blinding him with its dazzling light. There are actually 60,000 immortal crystals inside. The elder was shocked and remained stunned for a few moments before reacting. He then enveloped the immortal crystals with a spell until they disappeared. The next moment, the void suddenly shook, a crack opened up, and it turned into a small waterfall, rushing towards the snow-clad youth. The water was crystal clear, filled with a misty, ethereal aura. It was clearly all celestial liquid. Carefree, Nangong Chen laughed, sitting cross-legged on the ground, his bare, muscular upper body already exposed, letting the immortal liquid wash over him. The Great Zhou Immortal Scripture is not a simple cultivation method, nor is it only used for cultivation. It can also be regarded as a martial art that assists cultivation. After all, the immortal apertures he opened were all to help him better absorb spiritual energy and expand his spiritual sea. This means that, within the same realm, he possesses a recovery speed that is difficult for ordinary people to match, as well as a wider spiritual sea. This is a method to improve one's foundation. Moreover, he actively controls this method and can sense changes in external time, so it won't delay things. Thinking of this, Nangong Chen immediately activated the Great Zhou Immortal Scripture with all his might, his whole body radiating light spots, which were the 154 immortal apertures absorbing the immortal spirit liquid with all their might. At this moment, the Heavenly Origin Spirit Tablet has nearly 70,000 units of immortal spirit liquid. The environment inside the steel was completely different, with spiritual energy so abundant it was unimaginable, conjuring up celestial landscapes in the void. The precious herbs standing in the sky trembled, emitting joyful and excited signals, frantically absorbing the continuous stream of spiritual energy. The same applies to world tree seedlings. However, no matter how well he absorbed these medicinal herbs, it was ultimately far less than a drop in the ocean compared to what the boy below had absorbed. The boy below was enveloped in spiritual energy, almost turning into a ball of light, just like a sun. The old man was stunned. He rubbed his eyes, as this was the first time he had ever seen such an astonishing absorption speed. However, he quickly realized that he didn't have time to think about where the other party got so many immortal crystals. Instead, he said in a slightly flustered manner, "Don't absorb them all. Leave 10,000 immortal spirit liquid to maintain the spiritual energy in the current spirit tablet. Otherwise, your world tree sapling won't be able to survive." Chapter 6:0 For the Chu family moves here. Meanwhile, on the streets of the capital, a long procession was slowly moving forward, the steady sound of horses' hooves echoing and lingering. This commotion attracted the attention of the surrounding people, who craned their necks to watch and whispered among themselves. Rumor has it that today is the day the Chu family relocates to our divine dynasty. And it's true. I never imagined that one day my divine dynasty would become an appendage of one of the world's top aristocratic families. Sigh. It's truly a sad state of affairs. That's for sure. You don't even look at it. The prestige of the divine dynasty in the entire 3 provinces is now far beyond what the Great Zhou Dynasty could ever have. It's a complete upheaval. Speaking of which, the father and son from Tianyuan Pavilion also came to our divine dynasty today, right? It's quite unexpected that Tianyuan Pavilion's headquarters would be established in our divine dynasty. Wouldn't that make it easier for us to buy those pills and magical treasures in the future without having to travel all the way to Central Divine Continent? Everyone's faces showed excitement. Just recently, the imperial court issued 2 edicts. One edict stated that, in order to promote the development of the Righteous Path Alliance, after in-depth and friendly talks with the Chu family, the Chu family decided to send a group of young disciples to the divine dynasty to study and exchange ideas. Among them was Chu Saintis, the second-ranked prodigy on the Xian Tian ranking. These young members of the Chu family enjoy citizenship in the divine dynasty and can make their own choice after 1,000 years. Those who wish to stay in the divine dynasty can do so, while those who do not wish to stay will be compensated with some financial resources by the divine dynasty. The moment this imperial edict was issued, the whole world was shaken. Putting aside whether the Chu family was willing or not, the mere mention of deep and friendly exchanges made their hair stand on end. Why would you, a dominant power, engage in deep and friendly exchanges with a small family like yours? If it were just Saintess Chu coming, that would be one thing, since they were aware of her ambiguous relationship with the current double pupil. but sending so many young members of the Chu family was quite significant. Could it be that they intend to sideline the current Chu family in Chu City and make the Chu family of the Divine Dynasty the legitimate successor? After all, 1,000 years of study is quite daunting. Unless one is a quasi-saint or a saint, it could keep a low-level cultivator for almost half their life, or even their entire life, living in the Divine Dynasty without being able to leave. The Righteous Alliance had mixed feelings about this matter. They were happy that going to that Divine Dynasty to cultivate and develop would be a good thing, but worried that if they really went, would they still be able to gain their freedom? Before the aftershocks of the first edict had subsided, a second edict was issued, containing even more explosive information. The Tianyuan Pavilion, which had been silent for a long time, was officially incorporated into the Divine Dynasty, and its headquarters would be moved to the center of the Divine Dynasty. Upon hearing this news, the real estate agents who had been speculating on Sunset City's property prices were immediately stunned, and their blood boiled. Sunset City, once known as a place where every inch of land was worth its weight in gold, saw a continuous exodus of merchants and travelers after losing Tianyuan Pavilion, causing property prices to plummet. The wealthy turned their attention to developing their businesses in the Divine Dynasty, but non-citizens of the Divine Dynasty could not buy houses, and the central area of the Divine Dynasty belonged to the imperial court, so construction could not be carried out haphazardly. This greatly worried them, and it took them a long time to come up with a solution. Invest their money in the second and third-tier cities of the capital, allowing them to build restaurants, inns, and so on, sharing the profits. As a result, some wealthy individuals who sensed the business opportunity have recently begun to amass wealth and head to the Divine Dynasty, intending to make a big profit. The Divine Dynasty had anticipated this move and did not stop it from benefiting itself. Instead, they sent down some financially savvy individuals to standardize management, so as to prevent their own people from being cheated or sold out without even realizing it. These are the specific contents of the two edicts. Although the people of the Divine Dynasty did not receive any substantial benefits, they all knew that everything was for their good, hence their excitement. Soon, the sound of horses' hooves on the street grew louder, and the previously blurry figures became clearer. The two riding white spirit horses at the front must be Saintess Chu and Saint Chi. They are both very important figures in the three states. It's a rare sight to see them. Some people gasped, craning their necks as if they wanted to get their eyes close to see. Wow, that Saintess Chu truly lives up to her reputation. Not only is her cultivation powerful, but she herself is as beautiful as a fairy. If we could have such a partner, even a single kiss would be enough to make us die without regret. I truly envy the crown princes every day. Fellow Taoist, you should tone it down. You're practically drooling. Shoo, keep your voices down, they're coming. The young cultivators were talking animatedly when they were suddenly reminded of something. They quickly straightened their sleeves, pretending to be elegant gentlemen, and casually glanced at the person who had come from not far away. Two spirited steeds came into view first, followed by two figures, one old and one young, on their backs. The two seemed to be talking, occasionally smiling. Seeing is believing. Today's visit has truly broadened my horizons. The Divine Dynasty is a land of outstanding people and abundant resources, and its prosperity far exceeds my imagination. No wonder it has produced such amazing figures as the Crown Prince and Crown Princess. Looking at everything before her, Chu Yan's beautiful eyes shone brightly, and she exclaimed from the bottom of her heart. The shock she felt along the way today was considerable. Putting aside the fact that the terrifying concentration of spiritual energy on this street is comparable to that of her family's sacred land, the fact that she hasn't seen a single mortal along the way and that there are so many powerful people is enough to prove the value of the Divine Dynasty's hegemonic status. There are so many cultivators that the other two states combined are not enough to compare. No wonder so many geniuses have made it onto the Xian Tian ranking in such a short time. And no wonder there are so many powerful figures. The old man in hemp clothing smiled, tugged at the rope in front of him, and said, "We have achieved this much, all thanks to the Crown Prince." Oh, Chu Yan was stunned. She hadn't expected this to be connected to Nangong Chen. Chu Yan shook his head and said nothing more, but said, "Saintess Chu will be one of us from now on." It's more interesting for her to explore and learn about the history of the Divine Dynasty herself. I won't say anything more here. Before Chu Yan could speak, he looked at a massive and magnificent building not far away, pointed at it, and said softly, "That mansion is where you, Saintess Chu, will live from now on. When you arrive, officials from the court will meet with you. Please don't take our conversation to heart." Chu Yan quickly shook her head and cupped her hands, saying, "Not at all. It's more like we juniors have troubled you. If it weren't for the seniors escorting us all the way, we wouldn't have been able to arrive so safely. We hope you will come to celebrate our new home." Chapter 605. Several girls gathered, creating quite a lively atmosphere. Yin shook his head, politely declining without making a sound. After all, he has nothing to do next, so there's no need for him to stay any longer. Most importantly, he had already completed the task assigned to him by the Crown Prince, and in order not to delay things, he had to go back and report first. Yin looked regretful, but knowing the other person's temperament, she didn't try to stop him. They parted ways only when they reached the door. Yin watched the other person's figure disappear completely, give a slight bow, and then looked up at the magnificent mansion in front of her. This was the first time she had officially seen the environment where she would live in the future. It looked incredibly grand, with even the threshold being made of luxurious purple goldwood. With just a probe of her divine sense, she could tell that the area covered about 15 square miles, which was incredibly spacious enough to accommodate the 5,000 clansmen behind her. Moreover, the location is excellent. Although she doesn't know exactly which ring road in the capital, she can see a corner of the palace not far away with just a glance, so it shouldn't be too far. Is that Saintess Chu? Just as Yin was about to knock on the door in front of her suddenly opened, and two people walked out. One was a middle-aged woman dressed in a palace dress, whose cultivation level was at least at the Purple Mansion realm. She looked at Yin with a kind smile on her face, and her lips moved slightly, clearly indicating that she was the one who had just asked her the question. The other one was an elderly man in a blue official robe, whose cultivation was also at the Purple Mansion level. He also looked at Yin and the others with a smile. These two must be the people sent by the imperial court to make the handover. Yin's beautiful eyes flickered as she thought to herself without making a sound. Then she bowed slightly to the two men and said, "This humble woman, Yin, greets you two lords." No. Upon hearing this, the middle-aged woman waved her hand with a look of fear and trepidation. "I am but a mere Purple Mansion master. How could I possibly accept such a courtesy from you, sir?" Wei Zhong nodded, his aged face immediately falling, and he said with a worried expression, "Saintess Chu, please don't make us feel bad." Yin scratched her head, not expecting such a strong reaction from the two, and laughed awkwardly. "Huh. Okay. Seeing this, the middle-aged woman breathed a sigh of relief and revealed a pleasant smile. "Sir, my name is Huang Lu, and I am the steward of this mansion. You could just call me Madam Huang. I am in charge of coordinating the work in the mansion on a daily basis." "Is that you, Huang Yang?" Yin nodded slightly, making it a memory, her heart trembling slightly. The Divine Dynasty is so extravagant, even appointing someone from the Purple Mansion realm as its chief administrator. "My name is Wei Zhong. I am a third-rank official in the Imperial Court under the Ministry of Literature, and I am responsible for compiling and registering information about the Chu family members." Wei Zhong smiled and cupped his hands in a respectful gesture. "So it's Minister Wei. I'll have to trouble you this time, senior." Yin's expression became much more serious. "I can't be considered a senior. I was just lucky to have met a good master." Wei Zhong waved his hand, changing the subject, and gestured for the other party to follow him. Huang Lu, on the other hand, bowed to Yin and then directed the servants to unload the horses for the Chu family members. She then led the Chu family's young men and women, who had been tense and fearful all day, to the mansion to rest and clean up the mess. Seeing this, Yin secretly admired the thoughtfulness of the Divine Dynasty and followed Wei Zhong. Before long, the work of allocating houses was completed. Huang Lu, on the other end, was slightly surprised, feeling that it had been done rather quickly. She had thought these outsiders would be somewhat arrogant, but to her surprise, they were all very obedient, cooperating with whatever she was told, and completing some tasks in no time. Immediately, she developed a much better impression of this group of Chu family members. Meanwhile, Yin had arrived at a spacious main hall, and the sights along the way filled her with emotion. "Saintess Chu, how does the concentration of spiritual energy here feel?" Wei Zhong poured her a cup of tea and asked her gently. Yin took a small sip, and put it down. Her beautiful eyes were still filled with shock as she said, "I have never seen anything like it in my life. It is like a fairyland." In just 2 short sentences, she fully expressed her feelings at that moment. If the spiritual energy on the street is comparable to her sacred home, then the concentration of spiritual energy here is beyond her ability to describe. She thought that even if 10 saints' spirit gathering arrays were placed here, it probably wouldn't be this outrageous. She looked up at the sky and could see water droplets formed from spiritual energy falling to the ground and shining with a divine light. Even the plants used for ornamental purposes here are nurtured to be crystal clear and full of vitality, completely comparable to the spiritual plants in the medicinal fields outside. If I cultivate here, I might break through to the saint realm very quickly. Yin's beautiful eyes shone brightly as she gazed at this breathtakingly beautiful world, her cultivation within her body showing subtle signs of weakening. I finally finished my exams today. After I get home tomorrow, I'll catch up on the missing chapters. I'll dedicate myself to writing during the holiday. So please don't worry. Because I stayed up all night studying yesterday, and I have an exam today, I'm very sleepy now. I'll take a nap first and finish this chapter later. Please update soon, and please give me gifts.